I had been sitting alone for nearly an hour while my daughter laughed with donors and my son-in-law pretended not to know me. Then a man collapsed in the middle of the hospital ballroom. Before anyone could react, a young nurse locked eyes with me, froze, and whispered, "Please, tell me you're William Foster." The room fell silent as she stepped toward me with tears in her eyes. "You trained me," she said loudly. "If I'm saving lives today, it's because of you." My family stared at me as though they were seeing a complete stranger for the very first time. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to stay with me until the very end. Please like this video if you've ever felt overlooked by the people you love, and subscribe if you enjoy stories about resilience, family, and second chances. Most of all, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, what time it is in your corner of the world, and whether you've ever discovered that someone's quiet past was far greater than anyone imagined. My name is William Foster, and for most of my life, I believed a man could survive almost anything, as long as he still had family waiting for him at the end of the day. I believed that after my wife Helen died. I believed that when I packed up the little house we had bought together outside Columbus, Ohio, and moved into my daughter's guest room because she said she needed help with her son. I even believed it on the mornings when my son-in-law, Jason Carter, walked past me at the kitchen table without saying good morning, as though I were an old chair someone had forgotten to throw away. I was 68 years old then. Not ancient, not helpless, not confused. My knees ached when it rained, and I sometimes forgot where I left my reading glasses, but my mind was sharp. Sharper than anyone in that house wanted to admit. Emily, my daughter, used to know that. When she was little, she would run to the front door the moment I came home from work. She would wrap herself around my leg and ask, "Daddy, did you save anybody today?" Back then, she thought I was a hero. Back then, I still wore pressed uniforms, carried training manuals in the trunk of my car, and came home smelling faintly of hospital disinfectant and black coffee. Helen would smile at me from the stove, and Emily would sit at the table coloring while I told safe versions of my day. I never described blood. I never described grief. I only told her about courage. But children grow up. They marry people who measure worth in square footage job titles and what kind of car is parked in the driveway. They learn to be embarrassed by the very hands that once carried them. Jason was a financial consultant, or at least that was what he called himself. He wore expensive watches, spoke loudly on business calls, and treated every dinner conversation like a performance. He had a way of smiling that never reached his eyes. "William," he said one morning, standing by the marble kitchen island with his phone in one hand and a protein shake in the other. "Could you not leave your mail on the counter? Clients come by sometimes." I looked down at the single envelope beside my coffee mug. It was from my Medicare supplement provider. "Sure," I said, picking it up. Emily was making toast near the stove. She didn't look at me. "It just makes things look cluttered, Dad," she said softly. Cluttered. That was the word they used for anything that reminded them I lived there. My coat on the hallway hook was clutter. My old framed photograph of Helen was clutter. My worn leather Bible on the side table was clutter. Even my voice at breakfast seemed to clutter the clean, polished air of their house. Their home sat in a pleasant suburb outside Cincinnati, with trimmed hedges, white columns, and a front door painted navy blue. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place where people were happy. Inside, everything had a place. Except me. I lived in the guest room at the end of the hall, the one Jason still called the spare room, even after I had been there for nearly 3 years. My clothes fit into one closet. My books stayed in 2 cardboard boxes because Emily said built-in shelves would look too heavy in that room. Most mornings, I woke before everyone else. Old habits. In my working years, I was always awake before sunrise, reviewing class notes, checking equipment, thinking through emergency drills. Now I made coffee quietly and sat by the window before the house started moving. Sometimes I heard Emily and Jason talking when they thought I was still asleep. "He's getting older," Jason said once. "I know," Emily answered. "I'm just saying we need to think long term. We can't have your father here forever." There was a pause. "He helped with Ethan when he was younger," Emily said. "And now Ethan is grown," Jason replied. "Your father doesn't do much anymore." I stared into my coffee until the surface stopped trembling. "Doesn't do much anymore." I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because sometimes pain arrives dressed as absurdity. I had spent decades teaching people how to keep strangers alive in the worst moments of their lives. I had stood in smoke, rain, wreckage, and hospital corridors. I had trained nurses, EMTs, firefighters, and young doctors who were too proud to admit their hands shook. But in my daughter's house, I had become a man who didn't do much. My grandson, Ethan, was 19, then tall and restless with headphones always around his neck. He had been accepted into a pre-nursing track at a community college and wanted to transfer into a major hospital training program. When he was younger, he used to sit with me and ask questions about first aid. I taught him how to wrap a sprained wrist, how to check breathing, how to stay calm when everyone else panicked. But Jason didn't like that. "Dad," Emily told me one afternoon when Ethan was 16, "maybe don't fill his head with those old emergency stories." "They're not stories," I said. "I know, but Jason thinks Ethan should focus on bigger opportunities." "Bigger than saving lives?" She sighed. "That's not what I meant." But it was what she meant, or at least what she had learned to mean. After that, Ethan stopped asking me questions. He still hugged me on holidays and said, "How's it going, Grandpa?" But his eyes were usually on his phone before I could answer. I did not blame him. Young people follow the temperature of the room. If everyone treats an old man like background noise, eventually the child learns to lower his voice around him too. The strange thing was, I never told them much about my past. Not the real parts. Emily knew I had worked in emergency care training. She knew I had spent years with hospitals and public safety programs. But she had been young when most of my career happened, and after Helen got sick, my life became smaller by choice. I turned down conferences. I stopped traveling. I retired earlier than I planned because family needed me more than the world did. At least, that was what I told myself. When Helen was dying, she held my hand one night and whispered, "Don't disappear after I'm gone, Will." "I won't," I promised. But grief has a quiet way of folding a person inward. After her funeral, I put away my certificates. I boxed up the plaques. I tucked the photographs and letters into an old storage trunk and slid it beneath the bed in my small house. I told myself I was being humble. I told myself the past was past. Maybe deep down, I was tired of being needed only in emergencies. So when Emily asked me to move in after Ethan started high school, I said yes. She said it would be good for all of us. She said the house felt safer with me there. She said Helen would have wanted it. For a while, I believed her. I drove Ethan to school. I cooked soup when Emily worked late. I fixed loose cabinet handles and sat with the dog during thunderstorms. I paid for groceries without mentioning it. I helped with utility bills when Jason said business was temporarily tight. Then Jason's business improved, or at least his spending did. New SUV, new patio, new suits, new friends. And suddenly, I was no longer helpful. I was inconvenient. One Sunday evening, Emily hosted dinner for Jason's colleagues. She told me about it 2 hours before guests arrived. "Dad, we're having people over tonight," she said, standing in my doorway. "I can help set the table." Her face tightened. "Actually, we thought maybe you'd be more comfortable eating in your room." I looked at her for a long moment. "My room? It's just business people," she said quickly. "They can be a little formal. You know how Jason gets." I did know. I knew he did not want to explain why his father-in-law lived down the hall in a cardigan with worn elbows, so I nodded. All right. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with a plate of roasted chicken balanced on my knees while laughter floated under the door. Someone asked Jason about family, and I heard him say, "Oh, Emily's dad stays with us sometimes. He's retired. Keeps to himself mostly." Keeps to himself, as if loneliness had been my idea. I set the fork down because my throat had closed. There are humiliations that shout, and there are humiliations that whisper. The whispering ones are worse. They slip into your bones. They make you wonder if maybe you really have become smaller, maybe less useful, maybe less visible. But every so often, something reminded me I was still there. Once, while Jason was carving a turkey on Thanksgiving, his hand slipped. The knife sliced deep into his palm. Everyone froze except me. I grabbed a clean towel, applied pressure, elevated his hand, checked the depth, and told Emily exactly what to do. Jason stared at me, pale and sweating. "You seem to know a lot about this," he muttered. "I've handled a few cuts," I said. Emily shot me a warning look as if even competence embarrassed her. Another time, Ethan's friend choked on a piece of steak during a backyard cookout. I was across the patio before anyone understood what was happening. 2 firm thrusts, and the boy coughed it out onto the grass. His mother cried into my shoulder. Jason laughed afterward and said, "Good thing the old man still has some tricks." Tricks. That was what he called it. I let him. I let many things pass because I thought silence was peace. I thought dignity meant not defending yourself. I thought love meant absorbing the insult so the family could keep sitting at the same table. But silence does not always protect a family. Sometimes it only teaches them they can wound you without consequence. By the spring Ethan turned 20, the house had become colder than any place I had ever lived. Emily still asked if I had taken my pills, but rarely asked how I felt. Jason still told me the Wi-Fi password when it changed, but never invited me to sit with his guests. Ethan still called me Grandpa, but the word had become polite instead of warm. Then one Friday afternoon, Emily walked into my room holding a navy tie. "Dad," she said, "we need you to come with us tomorrow evening." I looked up from the book in my lap. "Where the Hospital Foundation Gala. Ethan's internship program is being recognized." I smiled before I could stop myself. "That's wonderful." "Yes," she said, but her voice carried no joy toward me. "It's important. There will be doctors, donors, administrators. Jason wants everything to go smoothly." I understood the warning before she finished speaking. She held out the tie. "Please wear this." And Dad, there it was. The pause people make before asking you to shrink. "Please don't bring up your old work stories. It's Ethan's night." I took the tie from her hand. My fingers moved over the smooth silk, while something old and tired stirred inside my chest. "I understand," I said. Emily looked relieved, but after she left, I sat very still for a long time. On the dresser beside me was the only photograph I had refused to box away. Helen and I, younger, standing outside a training center in Cleveland. I was wearing a Navy instructor jacket. She was smiling like she knew something the world had not yet discovered. I picked up the frame and wiped a thin line of dust from the glass. "You told me not to disappear," I whispered. The house was quiet. For the first time in years, I wondered if keeping my past hidden had not been humility at all. Maybe it had been fear. Fear that if I reminded them who I had been, they would still choose not to care. I did not know then that the next evening, in a crowded hospital ballroom, a nurse named Rachel Bennett would say my name in front of everyone. I did not know my daughter would look at me as if I had betrayed her by being more than she remembered. And I certainly did not know that before the night was over, my grandson would learn that the old man sitting alone in the corner had been quietly standing behind his future all along. The next evening, Emily stood in the hallway outside my room, looking me over as if I were a piece of furniture she hoped would match the rest of the house. I had put on the navy tie she gave me. My gray suit was older but clean and pressed. Helen had picked it out years ago for a hospital awards dinner I never attended because Emily had gotten the flu that same afternoon. I remembered Helen standing behind me in the mirror, smoothing the lapels, saying, "One day, you'll let people celebrate you, Will." I smiled at the memory. Emily did not. "Dad," she said carefully, "you look nice." "Thank you." Her eyes moved down to my shoes. "Are those comfortable?" "They're fine. I just don't want you getting tired and needing to leave early." There was concern in her voice, but it was the kind of concern that carried embarrassment underneath it. She was not worried about my feet. She was worried I might become inconvenient in public. Jason came around the corner wearing a black suit that looked new. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at me. "That tie works," he said, as if he had personally solved a crisis. I nodded. "Glad to hear it." He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Tonight is important for Ethan. There will be hospital executives there, foundation donors, people who could open doors for him. I understand." Jason gave me a tight smile. "Good. So let's keep everything simple. No long conversations. No medical advice. No old war stories." I looked at him. "War stories? You know what I mean," he said. "Those emergency tales. People don't always know how to respond." Emily touched his arm. "Jason, what, I'm just being practical." I held my hat in both hands and said nothing. Over the years, I had learned that some people call cruelty practicality when they want to sleep well afterward. Ethan came downstairs a few minutes later. He wore a dark blue suit and looked taller than I remembered. His hair was neatly combed, and there was nervous excitement in his face. "Hey, Grandpa," he said. "Ethan," I said warmly, "you look like a young man with somewhere important to be." He smiled, then glanced quickly at Jason as if checking whether it was safe to enjoy the compliment. "Thanks," he said. Emily took several photos in front of the fireplace. She positioned Jason beside Ethan. Then she stepped in. Then she called the dog over for one. I stood near the hallway with my hat in my hands until Ethan looked over. "Mom, shouldn't Grandpa be in one?" Emily blinked. "Oh, right. Dad, come here." I walked into the frame. Jason's smile stiffened. The photo took half a second, but even then, I felt like an extra person squeezed into someone else's memory. We drove to St. Catherine's Medical Center in Jason's SUV. The hospital sat bright against the darkening Ohio sky, its glass entrance glowing with warm light. Outside the main building, banners hung from metal poles, St. Catherine's Foundation Gala. Honoring tomorrow's caregivers. I read the words twice. Tomorrow's caregivers. For a moment, my chest tightened. I had spent half my life trying to create tomorrow's caregivers. Men and women who could walk into chaos and bring order with steady hands. People who knew that saving lives was not about ego. It was about discipline, humility, and the ability to stay calm when fear filled the room. As we pulled up to the entrance, a valet opened Jason's door. "Remember," Jason murmured before stepping out, "tonight is Ethan's night." I almost asked him why Ethan's night required my silence. Instead, I adjusted my tie and followed them inside. The ballroom had been transformed with white linens, tall flower arrangements, and soft golden lighting. A string quartet played near the entrance. Men in suits and women in elegant dresses moved through the room holding wine glasses, laughing softly, leaning in to make connections that might become opportunities. Emily straightened her posture the moment we entered. Jason became louder, brighter, more polished. Ethan looked overwhelmed, but proud. I stayed one step behind. At the check-in table, a young volunteer asked for our names. Jason Carter, my son-in-law said. Emily Carter. Ethan Carter. And he paused just long enough for me to feel it. William Foster. The volunteer handed us name badges. Mine had been printed in smaller text beneath the others, perhaps because Jason had added me late. William Foster. Guest. I stared at that word. Guest. In my daughter's house. In my grandson's life. In a hospital where I had once taught people how to survive the first terrible minutes of an emergency. Guest. Emily leaned toward me. Dad, there's seating over there near the side. Why don't you rest while we say hello to a few people? I can come with you, I said. Jason gave a small laugh. It's mostly program people, William. We won't be long. They left me beside a round table near the wall, halfway hidden by a large floral arrangement. I sat down slowly, not because my body needed rest, but because my spirit did. From where I sat, I watched them move through the room. Jason shook hands like a politician. Emily smiled like a woman auditioning for a better life. Ethan stood between them, nodding politely as doctors and administrators congratulated him on being selected for the internship pathway. I was proud of him, truly proud. But pride can ache when you are not allowed to share it. A server stopped by with a tray of sparkling water. I took one glass and thanked her. She smiled at me with more warmth than I had received from my family all evening. For nearly 30 minutes, no one came back to check on me. I looked around the ballroom and noticed things without meaning to. A woman near the dessert table was favoring her left leg. A man in a gray suit had flushed skin and kept rubbing his jaw. One of the older donors had a tremor in his right hand, but laughed as though nothing worried him. Old habits do not retire. My eyes found the exits, the AED cabinet near the hallway, the pathway between tables, the security guard near the side doors, the two nurses standing near the registration desk, talking quietly but watching the crowd. I knew the rhythm of a room. I always had. A hospital gala may look elegant, but any room full of people is still a room full of breathing bodies, fragile hearts, hidden conditions, and sudden risks. That was what I had taught my students. Never be distracted by the chandeliers. Emergencies do not wait for ugly rooms. A woman in a burgundy dress sat down at my table after a while. She looked to be in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes. Is this seat taken? She asked. Not at all, I said. She smiled. I'm Linda. My husband is on the foundation board. He's somewhere pretending he enjoys small talk. That made me chuckle. William Foster. Nice to meet you, William. Are you connected to the hospital? I hesitated. Across the room, Emily looked over just as Linda asked the question. Her eyes narrowed slightly as if she could hear us through the music. I'm here for my grandson, I said. He's entering the training program? How wonderful. You must be proud. I am. Linda studied me. You say that like you're proud and sad at the same time. I looked down at my glass. Families can make a man feel both, I said quietly. Before she could answer, Emily appeared beside the table. Dad, she said too brightly. There you are. I almost smiled. I had not moved. This is Linda, I said. Emily turned to her with her public face. So nice to meet you. Linda nodded. Your father was just telling me about his grandson. Emily's hand tightened around her clutch. Yes, Ethan has worked very hard. He must come from a family that values service, Linda said. Emily's smile flickered. Jason arrived behind her, placing a hand on her back. Emily, Dr. Reynolds is asking for us. Then he looked at me. Doing okay here, William. There it was again. That tone, the one people use with children and very old dogs. I'm fine. Jason smiled at Linda. We're trying not to wear him out. Linda's expression cooled, but she said nothing. Emily leaned down slightly. Dad will be right back. They disappeared again. Linda watched them go. You know, she said gently, being old does not mean being invisible. I looked at her, and for a moment I almost told her everything. About the classrooms, the training drills, the nights when my voice had guided terrified young medics through their first simulations. About Helen, about the trunk beneath my old bed, about the way my own daughter now treated my life like a subject best avoided. But I only said, some families forget that. The program began at 7. A hospital administrator welcomed everyone and spoke about future caregivers, community investment, and the importance of training young professionals with compassion and excellence. Ethan's group was invited to stand. My grandson rose from his chair near the front, smiling nervously as the room applauded. I clapped harder than anyone at my table. He did not look back. Then dinner was served. I ate slowly, listening to the conversations around me. People talked about vacation homes, medical grants, hospital expansion, and which universities had the best nursing pipelines. Twice, I heard the phrase, hands-on emergency training, and each time something inside me stirred. It was like hearing music from another room. After dessert, Emily finally came over. Dad, after the closing remarks, will take a few more photos. Then Jason wants to meet some donors. All right, you're doing great, she said, as if I had successfully behaved through a dentist appointment. I looked at her carefully. Emily, do you remember when you used to ask me if I saved anyone? Her face changed, only for a second. Then she looked away. Dad, not tonight. I was only asking. I know, she whispered. But please, not here. Not here. Not in front of the people whose respect she wanted. Not in the room where my past might embarrass her. She left before I could answer. I sat back and felt something heavy settle in me. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. A grief that had grown tired of explaining itself. The string quartet began playing again. Servers cleared plates. People stood and mingled. Jason was laughing near the stage with Dr. Michael Reynolds, the program director whose name I had heard Ethan mention many times. Emily stood beside them, shining with pride. I watched my daughter smile at strangers while avoiding the man who had raised her. Then I heard it. A sharp sound from the far side of the ballroom. A glass hitting the floor. A chair scraping backward. A woman gasping. At first, the music continued. Then the violin faltered. Conversations broke apart. Heads turned toward a cluster of guests near the center aisle. A man in a charcoal suit had collapsed beside his table. For half a second, no one moved. Then panic rushed in. Oh my God, call someone. Is he breathing? Move back. I stood before I decided to stand. My body remembered what my family had forgotten. The angle of the man's neck. The color draining from his face. The way his hand twitched once, then fell still. The frightened guests crowding too close. The dangerous confusion in the first seconds. I took one step forward. Jason saw me from across the room. His eyes widened, not with fear for the man on the floor, but fear of what I might do. He pushed through the crowd and grabbed my arm. William, he hissed, stay out of this. I looked at his hand on my sleeve. Then I looked at the man on the floor. And from somewhere near the ballroom doors, a nurse in navy scrubs came running. She was young, maybe in her mid-30s, with a badge swinging from her lanyard and urgency in every step. She dropped beside the collapsed man, then glanced up to clear the crowd. Her eyes landed on me. She froze. The room blurred around her. Her mouth opened slightly. And in that instant, I knew something was about to happen that my family could not control. For one breath, the whole ballroom seemed to hold still. The man on the floor lay between two round tables, one arm bent beneath him, his face turned toward the polished hardwood. A woman in pearls knelt beside him, sobbing his name again and again. "Robert! Robert, please!" People crowded closer, then backed away, then crowded again. Panic has its own rhythm. It spreads faster than fire because everyone thinks movement means help. But movement without purpose can kill a man. I pulled my arm free from Jason's grip. "William," he snapped under his breath. "Don't." I looked at him once. "Get out of my way." The words came quietly, but something in my voice made him release me. I stepped into the center aisle. "Everyone move back," I said. No one listened at first. They were too frightened, too stunned, too busy looking at one another for permission to act. So I raised my voice. "Move back now. Give him air. You in the blue dress call 911 and tell them we have an unresponsive adult male inside St. Catherine's ballroom. You, sir, find the AED cabinet by the hallway and bring it here. Do not run with it open. Just bring it." Heads turned toward me. The woman in the blue dress blinked, then grabbed her phone. A man near the wall hurried toward the hallway. Jason's face turned red. Emily stood near the stage with one hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with horror, not only at the emergency, but at me. I knew that look. She was terrified I would embarrass her, but I was past caring. The nurse in navy scrubs, the one who had frozen when she saw me, dropped beside the collapsed man. Her hands hovered for half a second. I saw the tremor. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. Shock. The kind that can steal time when time is the one thing a patient cannot spare. "Nurse," I said firmly. "Check responsiveness." The sound of my voice snapped her back. She leaned close. Sir, can you hear me?" No response. "Check breathing," I said. She tilted his head carefully, watched his chest, listened near his mouth. Not breathing normally, she said, her voice sharper now. "Pulse." Her fingers went to his neck. The ballroom had gone almost silent except for the woman crying and someone whispering a prayer. "I don't feel one," she said. "Start compressions." She placed her hands at the center of his chest and began. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her form was good, but her first compressions were too shallow. Stress does that. Even trained hands can hesitate when 100 eyes are watching. "Deeper," I said. "Let the chest recoil. Count out loud." She adjusted immediately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was when another hospital staff member rushed in with a small emergency bag. "Who's in charge here?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, the nurse looked straight at me. "He is." The words landed strangely in the room. Jason made a noise behind me. "Excuse me," I ignored him. "Bag valve mask ready?" I asked. The staff member nodded and knelt. "Good. 30 and 2 until the AED arrives. Keep people back. Someone move that chair and turn off the music." The quartet had already stopped, but the instructions seemed to wake the room further. 2 guests pulled chairs away. A security guard finally took control of the crowd. Someone guided the crying woman back a few feet, though she kept reaching toward the man. The nurse continued compressions. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. The staff member gave breaths. I watched the chest rise. Good seal. Good air. The man with the AED returned breathless, holding the case like it was made of glass. "Here," he said. "Open it," I told him. "Turn it on." He fumbled with the zipper. The nurse glanced up again. Her eyes locked on mine. There was still shock there, but beneath it was something else now. Trust. Deep, immediate, almost painful trust. I had seen that look before from students in their first real crisis. They did not need me to be young. They did not need me to be impressive. They needed me to be steady. So I became steady. Pads on bare chest, I said. Cut the shirt if you need to. The staff member reached for scissors from the emergency bag and opened the man's dress shirt. Buttons scattered across the floor. Someone gasped as though the broken buttons were the tragedy. Upper right chest, lower left side, I instructed. The AED voice began speaking in its calm, mechanical tone, analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. Hands off, I said. The nurse lifted her hands. For 3 seconds, no one breathed. Shock advised. The woman in pearls cried out, Everyone, clear, I said. The nurse looked around. Clear? The staff member lifted his hands. Clear. I scanned the man's body, the nurse, the staff, the crowd. Clear. The button flashed. Press it, I said. The nurse pressed. The man's body jerked. A ripple of horror moved through the guests, but I kept my eyes on the patient. Resume compressions, I said. The nurse went right back to work. That was the difference between training and hoping. Hope freezes after the shock. Training moves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Jason pushed closer, his voice low and furious. William, there are doctors here. Let them handle it. I did not turn around, then tell one to get on the floor. That silenced him. A middle-aged physician in a tuxedo stepped forward, embarrassment and urgency crossing his face at the same time. Dr. Harris, he said. Internal medicine. Good, I said. Take over airway. She stays on compressions until relief arrives, unless she tires. He hesitated, perhaps surprised that an old man in a gray suit was giving instructions in a ballroom full of medical professionals. Then he looked at the patient and knelt. Yes, sir. Sir. The word cut through me. Not because I needed respect from strangers, but because I had forgotten how it felt to be recognized by function instead of age. Emily had moved closer now. I could feel her before I saw her. A daughter has a presence a father recognizes even when he does not look. Dad, she whispered. I heard fear in her voice, not embarrassment this time. Fear. But there was no room for family pain yet. Emily, step back, I said. Please. She did. The AED analyzed again. No shock advised. Continue CPR. Keep going, I said. The nurse's arms were working hard now. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared at her temple. Switch at the next cycle, I told Dr. Harris. Do not interrupt more than 5 seconds. I can continue, the nurse said. I know you can, I said, but fatigue lies before it fails. Her mouth tightened and something like a memory passed across her face. She nodded. At the next count, Dr. Harris took over compressions. The nurse moved to airway support. Their transition was clean. A hospital emergency response team arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd with equipment. They came fast, controlled, professional. One of them, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a white coat over her evening dress, took in the scene quickly. What do we have? Adult male witnessed collapse, the nurse said. Unresponsive, pulseless, abnormal breathing. CPR started immediately. 1 shock delivered, no shock advised on second analysis. The doctor nodded. Good work. Then she looked at me. For a second, her brow furrowed. Not recognition. Curiosity. Were you the one directing initial response? Before I could answer, Jason stepped in. He was just trying to help, he said quickly. He's my wife's father. He gets confused sometimes, but thankfully staff is here now. The words were so ugly, so nakedly cruel, that even in the middle of the emergency, I felt them hit. He gets confused sometimes. Emily gasped. Jason! Ethan had appeared beside her, pale and shaken. His eyes moved from the patient to me, then to his father. Dad, why would you say that? Jason's jaw tightened. This is not the time. No, it was not, so I said nothing. The emergency team took over completely. Medication was prepared. Oxygen connected. Compressions continued. The room remained tense, but order had replaced chaos. I stepped back. My hands were still steady, but my chest felt hollow. The nurse in navy scrubs looked at me again, and this time she stood. She took 2 steps toward me. Her eyes were wet. Mr. Foster, she said softly. The sound of my name in her voice made something old stir inside me. I studied her face. Mid-30s, determined eyes, strong posture, a small scar near her left eyebrow. Something familiar, but time had changed her. I'm sorry, I said. Do I know you? She gave a trembling laugh, half disbelief, half emotion. You probably knew me when I was terrified of my own shadow. I stared at her. Her lips parted. Rachel Bennett, she said. I was in your emergency care certification class in Dayton, 12 years ago. The ballroom seemed to tilt. Rachel Bennett, a young woman in the back row, quiet, always early, always afraid of making a mistake. Her father had died of a heart attack when she was 16, and she told me once she wanted to learn emergency care because she never wanted to stand helpless again. I remembered. Rachel, I whispered. She pressed a hand to her chest. I can't believe it's you. Behind her, the emergency team prepared to move the patient. Someone announced they had a pulse back. A weak one, but there. The crying woman broke down completely. Guests began clapping softly, uncertainly, emotionally. But Rachel did not look away from me. Jason stood stiff beside Emily, his mouth slightly open. Ethan looked as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Rachel turned toward the people nearest us, then toward the doctor in the white coat. This man, she said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom, is the reason I knew what to do before the code team arrived. My throat tightened. Rachel, I said quietly, you did the work. She shook her head. No, sir. You trained me to do the work. The room changed again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but I felt it. The way people looked at me shifted from concern to curiosity, from pity to respect. And my family, the people who had hidden me at a side table, stared at me as if a locked door had just opened in the middle of the room. Jason tried to laugh. Well, he said that's very kind, but William hasn't worked in years. Rachel turned to him slowly. Her expression hardened. Maybe not, she said, but some instructors stay with you for life. Then she looked back at me, and the words she spoke next were the first crack in the wall my family had built around my name. You weren't just an instructor, Mr. Foster. You were the instructor everyone talked about. Rachel's words seemed to hang above the ballroom like a bell still vibrating after being struck. You weren't just an instructor, Mr. Foster. You were the instructor everyone talked about. For a moment, nobody spoke. The emergency team rolled the collapsed man toward the doors. His wife followed, trembling, supported by 2 hospital staff members. A few guests pressed hands to their mouths. Others stood frozen with cocktail napkins still clutched in their fingers as if the entire evening had been split in half, and no one knew which side they were standing on anymore. I watched the stretcher disappear through the double doors. Only then did I let myself breathe. Rachel was still facing me, Her eyes had not lost their shine. I could tell she wanted to say more, but she was fighting the same battle I was. How much truth belongs in a public room? Jason recovered first. Well, he said, forcing a laugh that sounded thin and brittle. That was certainly dramatic. Thank goodness the staff had everything under control. Rachel turned toward him. They had it under control because he organized the first response. Jason's smile twitched. I'm sure William was helpful, but this is a hospital event. There were trained professionals everywhere. Yes, Rachel said. And most of them were standing still. A murmur moved through the crowd. Emily's face flushed. Rachel, I said gently. She looked back at me, and for a second I saw the young student she had once been. Nervous, eager, desperate to be good enough. But she was no longer that girl. She was a nurse now. A strong one. No, Mr. Foster? She said quietly. I won't let them make this smaller. The words struck deeper than I expected. For years, everyone around me had made my life smaller. Smaller stories, smaller presents, smaller chair at the table, smaller name badge, guest, retired, confused, tired, old. Rachel stood there like a witness to a man my family had buried while he was still breathing. Ethan stepped closer. Grandpa, the way he said it was different. Not casual, not polite. There was a tremble in it. I looked at him. Yes, you really trained her, Rachel answered before I could. He trained my entire class, she said. And not just how to pass an exam. He trained us how to think when everything goes wrong. Ethan stared at her. Where? Dayton Emergency Response Institute. 12 years ago. She smiled faintly through her emotion. Your grandfather walked into that classroom on the first day, carrying a stack of manuals and a cup of black coffee. He didn't smile for the first 20 minutes, and I thought I was going to fail before we even started. Despite everything, I laughed softly. I smiled eventually. You did, she said, right after I correctly explained why panic kills faster than confusion. The memory came back so clearly I almost felt the chalk dust on my fingers. Rachel had sat in the second row, not the back. I remembered that now. She wrote everything down in blue ink. On the third day, during a trauma simulation, she froze when the mannequin's airway obstructed. Another instructor would have embarrassed her. I stopped the clock instead, pulled her aside, and told her fear did not make her weak. It made her aware of the stakes. The next day, she came in early and asked to run the scenario again. She passed. No, she did more than pass. She learned how to stay. Dr. Susan Miller. The woman in the white coat stepped toward us. Her gaze moved between Rachel and me. Mr. Foster, she said. I'm Susan Miller, Chief of Emergency Medicine here at St. Catherine's. I nodded. Doctor, have you worked with our training department before? Before I could answer, Jason cut in again. A very long time ago, maybe. William's been retired for years. We don't want to hold up the evening with old history. Emily touched his sleeve. Jason, stop. He looked down at her, irritated. What? Stop talking. That was the first time all evening my daughter had defended even the space around my name. Jason's jaw tightened, but he went quiet. Rachel took a small step toward Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, this is William Foster. He was one of the lead emergency care instructors in Ohio for years. When I trained under him, half the medics in my program already knew his name. He taught airway management field stabilization, CPR instruction, disaster response basics, and crisis leadership. Dr. Miller's expression sharpened with recognition, not of me personally, but of the weight of that list. William Foster, she repeated. Foster, method. I felt my stomach tighten. I had not heard that phrase in years. Rachel turned, smiling now. Yes, the Foster method. Ethan looked between us. What's that? I lowered my eyes. It was just a teaching approach. It was not just anything, Rachel said. It was the way he taught us to break an emergency into steps before fear took over. Scene breath circulation, command continuity. He made us repeat it until we could do it in our sleep. Dr. Miller nodded slowly. I've heard older staff mention that framework. I didn't realize that I was still alive. I asked, not bitterly, but with a tired humor. Her face softened. That you were standing in my ballroom tonight. Dr. Miller nodded slowly. I've heard older staff mention that framework. I didn't realize that I was still alive. I asked, not bitterly, but with a tired humor. Her face softened. That you were standing in my ballroom tonight. A few people nearby gave uncomfortable laughs, but I could feel their attention growing heavier. The crowd had not gone back to mingling. They were listening now. Jason hated that. I could see it in the set of his shoulders. Emily looked overwhelmed. Her eyes kept moving over my face as if searching for proof that I was the same father she had brought in through the side door of her life. Ethan, though, looked wounded. Not by me, by everything he had not been told. Grandpa, he said quietly. Why didn't I know this? That question was harder than all the others. Because children do not simply miss truths. Adults hide them. Sometimes with lies, sometimes with silence, and sometimes by making certain stories feel unwelcome until they stop being told. I looked at Emily. She looked away. I suppose, I said slowly, because I stopped talking about it. Rachel shook her head. Mr. Foster. It's true, I said. After my wife passed, I packed much of that life away. Emily flinched at the mention of Helen. Jason cleared his throat. Exactly, it's in the past, and tonight is about Ethan's future. Dr. Miller looked at him coldly. Mr. Carter, a few minutes ago, your father-in-law helped save a man's future. Jason's mouth closed. Ethan stepped closer to me. But Dad said you got confused sometimes. The pain in his voice made my chest ache. Jason snapped Ethan, not now. No, Ethan said louder. I want to know. Guests began pretending not to listen while listening to every word. That is how public humiliation works. People look at the floor, the flowers, their glasses, but their ears stay open. I did not want my grandson's pain displayed for strangers. So I reached out and touched his arm. Ethan, I said softly, this is not the place for all of that. His eyes filled. Then where is the place? At home, nobody talks to you. Mom says not to bring things up. Dad acts like you're a problem. And I just went along with it. Emily covered her mouth. I saw the exact moment shame found her. Not embarrassment. Shame. The kind that looks inward. Rachel stood silent beside me, but her presence steadied me. Strange how a student can become a witness when your own family refuses to remember who you were. Dr. Miller turned to Rachel. You said he trained your class. Were you with Dayton EMS before nursing? Yes, Rachel said. I was an EMT first, then nursing school. I work emergency now because of him. You chose emergency because of my grandfather, Ethan asked. Rachel nodded. I almost quit. I failed my first high-pressure simulation. I cried in the parking lot afterward. Mr. Foster found me sitting on the curb. I remembered. Rain tapping on the pavement. Rachel's shoulders shaking. Her saying, I can't do this. If someone dies because of me, I'll never forgive myself. I told you, I said softly. The people who fear getting it wrong are often the ones who care enough to get it right. Rachel's eyes overflowed. You remembered? I remember most of my students. You gave me another chance the next morning, she said. You stayed 2 hours after class. You made me run the scenario again and again until my hands stopped shaking." Ethan whispered, "Grandpa." Rachel turned to him fully now. "Your grandfather didn't just teach procedures. He taught us that every patient was someone's whole world. He said if we ever forgot that we had no business wearing a badge." The ballroom was quiet again. The kind of quiet that does not come from shock, but from reverence. I did not know what to do with it. Respect from strangers felt almost too bright after years of living in the dim corners of my daughter's home. Jason shifted uncomfortably. "This is very touching, but maybe we should let the program continue." "Jason," Emily said, her voice shaking, "please stop." He turned on her. "Emily, I'm trying to protect Ethan's evening." "No," she said, "you're trying to protect yourselves." That landed harder than anything Rachel had said. Jason stared at her. For a moment, I saw my daughter, not the polished suburban woman who corrected my tie, not the wife who absorbed her husband's opinions until they sounded like her own, but my Emily. The girl who once waited at the door and asked if I had saved anybody. Then her courage flickered, as if she was afraid of what she had just done. Dr. Miller looked at me. "Mr. Foster, would you mind stepping into the side lounge for a few minutes? I'd like to speak with you privately after we get an update on the patient." Jason seized on that. "Yes, good idea. Let's move this away from the donors." Rachel's eyes narrowed, but I lifted a hand. "It's all right," I said. I was tired, not physically. I had been tired in my spirit for so long that standing in the open felt like waking too quickly. As we began walking toward the side lounge, Ethan moved beside me, not behind his parents. That small choice did not escape me. Neither did Jason's face when he saw it. At the entrance to the lounge, Rachel paused and touched my sleeve. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the way they spoke about you." I glanced back. Emily stood a few feet away, tears in her eyes. Jason looked furious. Ethan looked lost. "They are my family," I said. Rachel's voice softened. "That doesn't mean they saw you clearly." I looked at her, then really looked at her. The student from Dayton had become a woman capable of naming the truth without flinching. "You turned out well, Rachel Bennett." She smiled through tears. I had a good teacher. Inside the lounge, the noise of the ballroom dulled behind the closing door. Dr. Miller stepped away to take a call about the patient. Rachel remained with me. Ethan slipped in too uncertain, as though he needed permission. I sat in a leather chair near the window. My hands finally began to tremble. Ethan noticed. "Grandpa?" "I'm all right," I said, but I was not sure I was, because having your worth revealed after being dismissed does not feel like victory at first. It feels like grief. Grief for every year you spent making yourself easy to ignore. Rachel crouched slightly in front of me, not as a nurse with a patient, but as a student returning to the man who once believed in her. "Mr. Foster," she said, "there are people in this hospital who need to know you're here." I shook my head. "Rachel, no." "Yes," she said gently, "because what happened tonight wasn't an accident." I looked at her. She glanced toward Ethan, then back at me. "I don't think your grandson's internship selection was either." Ethan went still. "What does that mean?" he asked. Rachel's face changed, as if she had realized she was standing at the edge of something larger than a reunion. Before she could answer, Dr. Miller returned to the room. "The patient has a pulse and is being taken to the cardiac unit," she said. "He has a chance because CPR started quickly." Relief moved through me so powerfully I had to close my eyes. Then Dr. Miller looked directly at me. "And now, Mr. Foster," she said, "I need to ask you something. Are you the same William Foster who trained under the old Ohio Emergency Care Coalition?" Rachel stood slowly. Ethan turned to me. I opened my eyes. After all those years of silence, the past had finally found my name. Yes, I said. I am. Dr. Miller's question pulled a door open inside me that I had kept locked for years. Yes, I said again. I trained under the Ohio Emergency Care Coalition. Later, I taught with them. Rachel's eyes softened as if she had been waiting for me to say it out loud. Ethan stood near the window, his face pale with confusion and awe. Grandpa, why does everyone know pieces of you that I don't? That question found a tender place. I looked down at my hands. They were older now, the veins raised the skin thinner than it used to be. But I could still remember them wrapped around training equipment, demonstrating compressions, checking pulse points, writing notes on whiteboards in crowded classrooms. I suppose I said, because I let the pieces scatter. Dr. Miller did not interrupt. Rachel stood beside her, quiet but watchful. Outside the lounge doors, the gala had begun murmuring back to life. But in that small room, time slowed. When I was younger, I didn't plan on becoming an instructor. I wanted to work where I could help directly. Ambulances, ER support, disaster response drills, anywhere people needed hands that didn't shake. Ethan leaned forward slightly. I was good under pressure, I continued. Not because I was fearless. Fear was always there. But I learned how to make it stand behind me instead of in front of me. Rachel smiled faintly. That sounds exactly like you. I nodded, though my throat had tightened. Eventually, supervisors noticed that whenever new people rode with me or trained near me, they improved. Not because I was special. I just believed people deserved clear instruction before being thrown into chaos. Dr. Miller folded her arms, listening carefully. So they asked me to teach, I said. At first, I hated it. Rachel's eyebrows rose. You hated teaching. Hated? I did, I admitted. I thought classrooms were too clean, too safe, too far away from the truth. But then I watched a young EMT freeze during a mock cardiac arrest. Everyone laughed afterward. Not cruelly, but enough that he heard it. I saw his face, and I knew if someone didn't help him through that fear, he would quit, or he would carry shame into the field. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor. So I stayed after class. We ran the scenario again. Then again. Then again. By the 5th time, his hands stopped shaking. 2 months later, he helped save a farmer who collapsed outside a feed store. Rachel whispered, That's why you taught. Yes, I said, because courage can be trained, but humiliation only teaches people to hide. The room became very still. Maybe Emily should have been there to hear that. Maybe Jason most of all. But part of me was relieved they were not. I did not want to spend my memories defending themselves against his smirk. In those years, I continued. I taught nurses, EMTs, volunteer firefighters, school staff, church safety teams, hospital aides, anyone willing to learn. Some were brilliant. Some were terrified. Some thought confidence was the same as competence, which was always the most dangerous kind. Rachel gave a small laugh. I remember what you said about that, she said. A loud rescuer can still be an unsafe rescuer. That's right, I said. Noise is not leadership. Calm is. Ethan looked at me as if each sentence rearranged something inside him. I didn't know any of this, he said. I know. Mom never talked about it. No, I said softly. She didn't. He looked toward the door. Why I drew a slow breath. The answer had more than one edge. Your mother was young when my career was at its busiest, I said. She knew I worked long hours. She knew I came home tired. She saw the missed dinners more clearly than the people I'd trained. Children remember absence before sacrifice. Ethan's face tightened. But you were helping people. I said, but I was also gone more than I should have been. That is a truth too. Rachel looked at me with concern, but I held up one hand. A story becomes dangerous when we only tell the part that makes us innocent. My own voice surprised me. Maybe I had spent too many years silent because once I began telling the truth, I could not bear to polish it. I loved my work, I said. I loved being useful. I loved watching frightened people become capable. But there were nights I came home after Emily had already fallen asleep. Helen would leave dinner covered on the stove, and I'd eat alone while she told me what I had missed. School projects, small fevers, birthday invitations, a little girl asking why Daddy always had to go when the phone rang. Ethan swallowed hard. I thought I was building something noble, I said. And I was. But every noble thing still costs someone something. For the first time all night, my memories did not feel like medals. They felt like old bills finally being read. After Helen died, I continued, everything changed. Rachel lowered her gaze. She had breast cancer, I said. Aggressive, stubborn, much like her. A sad smile touched my mouth. For a while, I believed I could handle illness the way I handled emergencies. Assess, plan, act, adjust. But grief does not follow protocols. No one spoke. Helen made me promise not to disappear, I said. She knew me better than anyone. She knew I had spent a lifetime being needed in crisis. She was afraid that when she was gone, I would only know how to live if someone was falling apart. My eyes burned, but I kept going. At first, I tried to keep teaching. I went back to the classroom 3 weeks after her funeral. I stood in front of 20 students and began explaining respiratory distress. Halfway through, I looked at a young woman in the front row. She had Helen's eyes. Not exactly, but close enough. And I couldn't breathe. Rachel's hand moved to her heart. I dismissed class early, I said. Never did that before. I went home, sat on the kitchen floor, and realized I had taught thousands of people how to respond to crisis, but I had no idea how to survive quiet. Ethan's eyes filled. So I stepped back. I said. Then Emily needed help. She was overwhelmed working raising you trying to keep life steady. She asked me to come. I thought maybe that was my next purpose. It was, Ethan said quickly. You helped raise me. I looked at him gently. I know, and I do not regret that. I meant it. I remembered his small hand in mine, crossing parking lots. His face sticky with popsicle juice. His questions about bandages and sirens and why people got scared. I remembered helping with homework, teaching him how to ride a bike, sitting beside him during thunderstorms, because loud noises frightened him when he was little. Those years mattered, but they had also become the doorway through which my family slowly reduced me. At first, I said, your mother thanked me for everything. Then gratitude became expectation. Then expectation became inconvenience. And eventually, the man who had come to help became the man taking up space. Ethan turned away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Rachel's voice was soft. You never told them who you were because you wanted them to love you without needing proof. I looked at her. It was exactly right and exactly unbearable. Yes, I said. I think that's true. Dr. Miller finally spoke. Mr. Foster, with respect, a person's history is not bragging. Sometimes it's context people need before they decide how to treat you. I gave a quiet laugh. Doctor, I spent years teaching people to assess the scene. Somehow I failed to assess my own. Ethan stepped closer. Grandpa, he said when I was applying for the internship, did you know? I hesitated. That question led toward a hallway I was not ready to enter, but there was no avoiding it forever. I knew you wanted it, I said. Did you help? Rachel glanced at Dr. Miller. Something passed between them. I made a few calls, I said carefully. Ethan stared at me. What calls? Old students, former colleagues, people who knew the training world. His mouth fell open. Mom said Dad talked to someone. Maybe he did, I said. I don't know what Jason did, but you helped. I asked people to look at your application fairly, I said. Nothing more? Rachel shook her head slightly as if she knew there was more, but she did not expose it yet. Ethan sat down across from me, stunned. All at once, I saw him not as the tall young man in the suit, but as the boy who once asked me how to stop bleeding from a scraped knee. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Because I did not want your gratitude to feel like a debt, I said, and because I was afraid your parents would think I had interfered. Ethan looked toward the closed door. They made me think you didn't understand any of this. That may be what they needed to believe, I said. His face hardened with hurt. That's wrong. Yes, I said, it is. The words sat between us simple and heavy. Dr. Miller's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up. Robert Langley is stable for now, she said. Cardiology believes the immediate CPR gave him a real chance. Relief moved through the room. I closed my eyes briefly. Even after everything, that was what mattered most. A man had a chance to go home. A wife might not become a widow tonight. Somewhere children or grandchildren might still hear his voice again. That was why we trained. Not for applause, not for plaques, not for speeches in ballrooms. For the next breath. When I opened my eyes, Ethan was watching me differently now. Not like a confused grandson, like a student standing before a lesson he had not known he needed. Grandpa, he said, will you tell me more someday? My chest tightened. About what? About all of it. Your work? Grandma. The things you taught people, the things I should have asked before. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. Someday, Rachel looked toward the door as voices grew louder outside. I don't think someday is going to wait very long. Before I could ask what she meant, the lounge door opened. Emily stood there. Her eyes were red. Her makeup had begun to blur beneath them. Behind her, Jason hovered stiffly, angry and uneasy. Emily looked at me, then at Ethan, then at Rachel and Dr. Miller. Dad, she whispered, people are asking who you are. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. For years, she had asked me to be less. Now the room wanted to know more, and for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel responsible for making that easier for her. Emily's words stood in the doorway like a confession she had not meant to make. People are asking who you are. For years, my daughter had wanted no one to ask that question. She wanted me simple, quiet, easy to explain. Retired father, lives with us, keeps to himself, gets confused sometimes. Now, in the same hospital where she had asked me not to mention my past, strangers were asking for the truth she had tried to hide. I looked at her for a long moment. What did you tell them? I asked. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Jason stepped in behind her. We told them this has been a very emotional evening and that you need privacy. Rachel's eyes narrowed. That is not an answer. Jason ignored her. His gaze stayed fixed on me. William, this has already gotten out of hand. People are exaggerating what happened. Exaggerating, Ethan said. Jason turned sharply. Ethan, stay out of this. No, Ethan said, and his voice surprised all of us. I'm tired of staying out of things when they involve Grandpa. Emily flinched. Jason's face darkened. You don't understand what's going on. I understand enough, Ethan said. I understand that Grandpa helped save a man. I understand that Nurse Bennett knew him. I understand that Dr. Miller knows his work. And I understand you tried to tell people he gets confused. The room went silent. Jason adjusted his cufflinks, a habit he had whenever he felt cornered. I was trying to prevent a scene. No, Dr. Miller knows his work. And I understand you tried to tell people he gets confused. The room went silent. Jason adjusted his cufflinks, a habit he had whenever he felt cornered. I was trying to prevent a scene. No, Rachel said quietly. The emergency was a scene. Mr. Foster brought order to it. Jason looked at her with a tight smile. Nurse Bennett, with all due respect, this is a family matter. Rachel did not move. With all due respect, I am part of the reason your family now knows the truth. Emily whispered. Please, everyone. Her voice was small. That hurt me more than Jason's anger. My daughter had spent years adapting herself to his certainty until even her shame sounded apologetic. Dr. Miller stepped toward the door. Mr. Carter, the hospital, is not interested in embarrassing your family, but Mr. Foster's role tonight was real. Several board members saw him take command before my team arrived. Jason laughed, once humorless. Take command. He's 68 years old. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. Dr. Miller's expression hardened. Age does not erase training. Jason opened his mouth, but Emily touched his arm. Jason, stop! He looked at her stunned. You keep saying that. Because you keep making it worse. The words trembled, but she said them. For a moment, I saw the battle in her face. Wife against daughter. Image against truth. The life she had built against the man who had built her. I stood slowly. My knees protested, but my voice did not. I don't want to fight, I said. Jason exhaled with relief too soon. But I won't let you call the truth exaggeration. His face froze. I looked at Emily. And I won't pretend I am confused so this evening is easier for you. Her eyes filled at once. Dad, she whispered. I never said. You let him say it. That hurt her. I saw it land. But sometimes truth must land before healing can begin. She looked down. Ethan moved closer to me. Grandpa? Did Mom know about your work? I did not answer immediately. Emily did. I knew some of it, she said softly. Jason turned toward her. Emily. No, she said, her voice cracking. He deserves an answer. She looked at Ethan, then at me. I knew Dad taught emergency care. I knew people respected him. I knew he had awards somewhere. No, she said, her voice cracking. He deserves an answer. She looked at Ethan, then at me. I knew Dad taught emergency care. I knew people respected him. I knew he had awards somewhere. She swallowed. I didn't know it was this much. Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. You didn't know because you never asked or because you didn't want other people to ask. Emily closed her eyes. That was answer enough. Jason shook his head. This is ridiculous. Emily, you don't owe anyone an apology for wanting a normal evening. A man almost died, Ethan snapped, and Grandpa helped save him. That is not ruining the evening. Jason pointed toward the ballroom. This was supposed to be about your internship. Rachel glanced at me, then at Dr. Miller. I saw the secret pressing against her mouth again. Dr. Miller noticed too. "Rachel," she said carefully, "what were you going to mention before Emily came in?" Rachel looked at me. I knew that look. She was asking permission without asking. I shook my head once. Barely. Not yet. But Ethan saw it. What he said. What else is there? Jason's eyes sharpened. Nothing. There is nothing else. The desperation in his voice told me he feared there might be. Rachel folded her hands in front of her. "I don't want to speak out of turn," Dr. Miller said. "Then let us stay with what we know." She turned to Emily and Jason. "Mr. Foster's name is not unfamiliar in emergency training circles. Some of our senior staff have referenced his teaching framework. Nurse Bennett is proof of his influence. Tonight, he demonstrated skills most people lose when they stop practicing." Jason looked trapped between anger and public politeness. "Fine. He had experience. Nobody is denying that." "You denied it 10 minutes ago," Ethan said. Jason glared at him. "Watch your tone." "No," I said. Everyone turned to me. I kept my eyes on Jason. "Do not correct him for speaking the truth." Jason's jaw tightened. "William, you are forgetting your place." There it was, not hidden this time, not polished, not dressed as concern. My place. For 3 years, Jason had been defining my place. Side table, spare room. No old stories. Eat in your room. Don't embarrass us. Stay out of this. Guest. A strange calm came over me. "My place," I said, "is not beneath you." Emily began to cry silently. Jason looked around, perhaps suddenly aware that Dr. Miller, Rachel, and Ethan were all watching him. "I didn't mean it that way," he muttered. "Yes," I said. "You did." The silence after that was clean and sharp. Ethan's voice broke it. "Grandpa? I'm sorry." I turned to him at once. "Ethan, you are not responsible for your father's words, but I believe them," he said. "Maybe not all of them, but enough." "I thought you were just retired. I thought you didn't understand what I wanted to do. And you were the one person in our family who understood it most." His pain was young, raw, and honest. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are learning something tonight that many people learn too late. What that respect should not require are some." His eyes filled again. Emily covered her mouth, and this time I knew she was not crying because others might see her. She was crying because she finally saw me. Rachel spoke quietly. "Mr. Foster used to tell us that the quietest person in the room might be the one who knows how to save everyone." I looked at her, and she smiled sadly. "I listened," she said. Dr. Miller checked her phone again, then looked toward the hallway. "The board chair is asking whether you would be willing to step outside briefly. Not for a speech, just to meet a few people who want to thank you." Jason immediately said absolutely not. No one moved. Even he seemed surprised by how fast he had answered. Dr. Miller looked at him. "I was asking Mr. Foster." Jason's face flushed. Emily whispered Dad. I looked toward the closed door. Behind it were strangers, whispers, questions, probably praise I did not feel ready to receive. Part of me wanted to leave through a back hallway, go home, take off the navy tie, and sit in the dark with Helen's photograph. But another part of me, a part I had neglected for far too long, was tired of hiding to make other people comfortable. I turned to Ethan. "Will you walk with me?" His answer came immediately. "Yes." Emily looked wounded, but she did not object. Jason did. "Ethan, you're staying with us." Ethan looked at him, then at me. "No, Dad." "I'm going with Grandpa." That was the second small choice of the night, but this one was not small to me. Rachel opened the lounge door. The sound of the ballroom returned soft voices, footsteps, the lingering tension of people waiting for a story to clarify itself. As I stepped into the hallway, heads turned. Some faces were curious, some grateful, some embarrassed for having overlooked me at the side table earlier. Linda, the woman who had sat beside me, stood near the wall with her hand pressed over her heart. When she saw me, she smiled. "William," she said softly. "Not guest, not old man, William." Dr. Miller guided us toward a small group near the hospital history display. A few board members stood there, along with 2 senior nurses and the administrator who had opened the program earlier. One older nurse stared at me, then whispered, "I remember your training tapes." I almost laughed. Those were terrible quality. "They saved half our orientation program," she said. Ethan looked at me as if the floor had shifted again. Jason and Emily followed at a distance. I could feel them behind me, but for once, I did not arrange myself around their discomfort. The administrator stepped forward. "Mr. Foster, on behalf of St. Catherine's, thank you for what you did tonight." "I did what anyone trained should do," I said. "But not everyone did?" he answered. That was difficult to hear because it was true. Rachel stood beside me. "He taught us that the first few minutes belong to whoever is willing to act." The older nurse nodded. "That sounds like Foster." Foster. Not William, not Grandpa, not Emily's father. Foster. A name that had existed before my family made it small. Then Rachel turned toward Ethan. "You should see something," she said. Jason stepped forward. "I think we've had enough surprises." Rachel did not even look at him. Dr. Miller studied her. "What are you thinking?" Rachel pointed down the corridor toward a quieter wing of the hospital. "The Hall of Honor." My breath caught. I had not heard that name in years. Emily whispered behind me. "What is that?" Rachel finally turned to her. "It's where St. Catherine's keeps records of people who shaped emergency care in this region. Training leaders, physicians, nurses, responders." Jason gave a short laugh. "And you think William is in there?" Rachel's expression did not change. "No," she said. For one brief second, Jason looked relieved. Then Rachel continued. "I know he is." Ethan stared at me. Emily's hand went to her mouth, and I stood there in the bright hospital corridor, feeling the past move closer with every heartbeat. Rachel's words followed us down the corridor. "I know he is." I heard Emily take in a small, broken breath behind me. Jason said nothing, which was unusual enough to make the silence feel louder than his objections. The Hall of Honor was not far from the ballroom, but the walk felt longer than it should have. We passed framed photographs of hospital founders, nurses from earlier decades, surgeons standing beside old equipment, and newspaper clippings preserved behind glass. The corridor smelled faintly of floor-polish flowers and that unmistakable hospital scent that had lived in my clothes for half my life. Ethan walked at my side, not ahead of me, not behind me, beside me. Every few steps he glanced at me as if afraid I might disappear before he could understand who I was. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "have you been here before?" "Years ago," I said, when I looked at the wall ahead. "Before your grandmother got sick." His face softened. "With Grandma?" "Yes. Helen came with me once. She hated hospital ceremonies, but loved free coffee." Rachel laughed softly behind us. "I wish I'd met her. She would have liked you," I said. Then, after a pause, I added, "She liked anyone who stood up straight and told the truth." Emily made a sound that was almost a sob. I did not turn around, not because I wanted to punish her, but because if I looked at my daughter right then, I might lose the strength to keep walking. Dr. Miller led us through a pair of glass doors into a quieter wing. The lighting changed there, softer, warmer. Along one wall, plaques were arranged in neat rows. Some held photographs. Others displayed names engraved in brass. In the center of the hall stood a digital screen rotating through archival images from St. Catherine's and regional emergency care programs. Rachel stopped before a section labeled Regional Emergency Training Legacy. My heart began to beat harder. I had forgotten that title, or maybe I had forced myself not to remember it. Rachel touched the edge of one frame. Here. At first, I did not look. I looked at Ethan instead. His eyes were fixed on the wall. Then Emily whispered, "Oh my God." That was when I turned. And there I was. Not the old man from the side table. Not the guest with the small name badge. Not the quiet father in the spare room. A younger version of me stood in the photograph wearing a Navy instructor jacket, one hand resting on a training mannequin, the other holding a clipboard. My hair was darker then, my shoulders broader, my face stricter than I remembered. Behind me stood a group of students in uniforms, some smiling, some trying not to. Beneath the photo, the plaque read, "William Foster Emergency Care Instructor and Regional Training Leader, recognized for outstanding contribution to emergency response education, crisis, leadership training, and community life-saving programs." Ethan read every word. Then he read it again. His lips moved silently. Jason stepped closer, his face pale now. That could be someone with the same name. Rachel's head turned slowly. Dr. Miller looked at him as though he had said something deeply foolish. Emily whispered, "Jason." But Jason kept staring at the plaque, fighting the truth, because the alternative was admitting he had spent years belittling a man other people had honored. The older nurse from the ballroom had followed us. Her name badge read Patricia Shaw. She stood beside Rachel with tears in her eyes. "It's him," she said. "I watched his training tapes when I was a new nurse. Everyone did back then." Jason's mouth tightened. "Training tapes don't make someone a legend." "No," Patricia said. "The people who survive because of the training do." The sentence settled over the hallway. Ethan turned to me. "Why didn't you keep this?" "I didn't put it here," I said. "But you knew. I knew there had been a display at one point. I didn't know it was still here." Rachel walked to the digital screen and tapped through the archive menu. "There's more." "Rachel," I said softly. She looked back at me. "Mr. Foster, your family needs to see what you never demanded they see." I wanted to tell her no, not because I was ashamed, but because exposure can feel like being undressed in a public place, even when what is revealed is honorable. But Ethan's eyes were pleading. Emily's face was wet with tears, and Jason's disbelief had not fully died. So I nodded once. Rachel selected a file. The screen flickered, then showed grainy footage from years earlier. A community training center, rows of folding chairs, a younger me standing before a class holding up 2 fingers. My recorded voice filled the hall. "The first rule is this: do not let fear make the room smaller. Look for exits. Look for help. Look for what the patient needs first. Panic looks at everything. Training looks at the next right thing." Ethan stared at the screen. I remembered that day. It had been a Saturday workshop after a regional accident left several rural communities wanting better emergency preparedness. Helen had packed my lunch that morning. Turkey sandwich apple, 2 oatmeal cookies. She had drawn a smiley face on the napkin because she said I looked too serious when I taught. The video shifted to a drill. Students practiced compressions. I moved between them, correcting posture, lowering shoulders, adjusting hand placement. Then came another clip. A newspaper headline appeared, "Regional Instructor Credited After Former Students Saved Children in Bus Crash Response." Emily covered her mouth with both hands. The image changed again, showing a school bus tilted near a ditch, emergency lights flashing, responders moving children toward waiting ambulances. The footage was old shaky, probably from a local news station. My younger face appeared for a brief interview. A reporter asked Mr. Foster, several responders at the scene were trained through your program. What do you want people to know tonight? The younger me looked uncomfortable on camera. I want them to know those responders did their job, I said on the screen. Training does not save lives unless people have the courage to use it. Rachel wiped beneath her eye. Patricia whispered, I remember that crash. My cousin's daughter was on that bus. I turned to her, startled. Was she all right? She was, Patricia said. She had a broken arm and a concussion. But she came home. I closed my eyes for 1 second. That was the thing about emergency work. You do not always know where your efforts end. A lesson taught in one room becomes a hand steady in another. A correction made during practice becomes the difference between panic and action years later. We rarely see the full path of what we give. Sometimes, though, the path comes back and stands in front of you with tears in its eyes. Ethan stepped closer to the screen. You were on the news. For about 30 seconds, I said. I hated every second. He let out a stunned laugh, but it broke halfway. Grandpa, I used to think you just knew basic first aid. I smiled sadly. I do know basic first aid, Rachel said, and advanced emergency response field triage crisis command, instructional design, and about 50 ways to make a room full of trainees terrified of doing shallow compressions. Despite the tension, several people laughed. Even Dr. Miller smiled. Jason did not. He stood with his arms folded, but something in his face had changed. The arrogance was still there, but it had begun to crack around the edges. Emily walked slowly toward the plaque. Her fingertips hovered near the glass but did not touch it. I remember this jacket, she whispered. I looked at her. She was staring at the photo, not at me. You used to hang it by the back door, she said. Mom would tell me not to put my sticky hands on it. My throat tightened. Yes, Emily's voice trembled. I used to hide candy in the pockets. I almost smiled. Peppermints. They melted once. She gave a broken little laugh through her tears. You were so mad. I was not mad. I was sticky. Ethan looked between us as if seeing a bridge appear where there had only been fog. Emily turned to me then. For the first time that evening, she did not look embarrassed. She looked young, lost, ashamed. Dad, she whispered, why did you let me forget? The question hit me harder than Jason's cruelty, because there was love hidden inside it, but also accusation. As though I had abandoned her memory by not defending it. I didn't know you had, I said. She began crying again quietly this time. Jason looked uncomfortable. Emily, don't do this here. She turned on him not loudly, but with a force I had not heard in years. Don't tell me how to feel about my father. He stepped back. Ethan's eyes widened. Emily looked back at the plaque. All this time I thought you were clinging to old stories. I was not clinging, I said. I was letting go. Rachel's face softened. But maybe I continued. I let go of too much. The digital screen shifted again this time, showing a group photo from an awards ceremony. I stood beside Helen. She wore a blue dress and held my arm with both hands. Her smile was radiant. Emily made a sound that seemed pulled from childhood. Mom. Ethan whispered, Grandma Helen. I had not expected to see that photo. It struck me with such force that I had to grip the edge of a display stand. Helen looked alive there, not in the way photographs keep people frozen, but in the way love can suddenly fill a room from a place beyond reach. She was proud of you, Rachel said softly. She was tired of me avoiding ceremonies, I replied, my voice rough. On the screen, Helen leaned toward me in the frozen image, as if still telling me I deserved to stand there. Emily stared at her mother's face, and something inside her broke open. "She knew," Emily whispered. "Yes," I said. "She knew everyone respected you." I nodded. "And I made you feel like you were nothing." I did not answer, because forgiveness given too quickly can become another way of hiding the wound. Jason shifted again. "Emily, that's not fair. We never said he was nothing." Ethan turned toward him. "You said he didn't do much anymore." Jason's face hardened. "That was private." "No," Ethan said. "It was cruel." The hallway went still again. Dr. Miller stepped back, giving us space, but Rachel stayed close to me. Emily looked at Jason as if she were seeing him clearly under unforgiving light. Then she looked at me. "Dad, I'm sorry," she said. Her apology was real, but it was also early, raw, frightened. I wanted to comfort her. Every fatherly instinct in me wanted to reach out and tell her it was all right. But it was not all right. Not yet. So I said, "I hear you." Her face crumpled. Ethan placed a hand on my arm. That small touch steadied me more than he knew. Rachel tapped the screen once more. "There's one last thing." I looked at her sharply. "Rachel." She hesitated. Then Dr. Miller stepped forward. "Mr. Foster, I think they should see it." "What is it?" Ethan asked. Rachel glanced down the hall toward the ballroom. "A record connected to the training program your internship came from." Jason's head snapped up. "What record?" Rachel looked directly at him. "The one showing whose recommendation brought Ethan's application to the review committee." Ethan went completely still. Emily whispered, "What?" Jason's face lost the last of its color. And I knew then that the night was not finished with us. Not even close. The hallway grew so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the digital display behind me. Rachel's words had opened a new wound before the old one had even stopped bleeding. The one showing whose recommendation brought Ethan's application to the review committee. Ethan looked at her first. Then he looked at me. "Grandpa," he whispered. "What is she talking about?" I felt every eye on me. Emily stood beside the Hall of Honor plaque with one hand pressed against her chest. Jason had gone completely still, but his eyes were moving too fast. He was calculating, rebuilding, looking for a version of events he could still control. I knew that look. I had seen it in trainees who made mistakes during simulations and tried to explain them away before admitting the patient was dying. "Rachel," I said quietly, "that is not yours to reveal." She lowered her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry." Dr. Miller stepped in gently. "Mr. Foster, if the record involves Ethan's internship, he may have the right to understand the process." Jason seized on that. "There is no mystery. Ethan was accepted because he earned it. I made calls, Emily helped with the application, and Ethan worked hard. That is the process." "No one is saying Ethan didn't earn it," I said. Jason turned on me. "Then why are we standing here acting like you secretly gave him his future?" The cruelty of that sentence was not in the words alone. It was in the fear beneath them. Jason was terrified that my quiet help might prove more meaningful than his loud confidence. Ethan's voice shook. "Dad, did you know Grandpa helped?" "I knew he was interested," Jason said quickly. "That's not what I asked." Emily looked from Jason to me. "Dad, did you contact someone at the hospital?" I could have denied nothing. I could have softened everything. For most of my life, that had been my instinct, take the sharp edge out of truth, so no one else bled. But I was tired of bleeding alone. "Yes," I said. Ethan closed his eyes. "I made calls," I continued, not to force anything, not to ask for special treatment. I called people I had trained, people who had gone on to work in emergency education, hospital programs, and nursing leadership. I asked whether Ethan's application could be reviewed carefully. I told them he had potential. Ethan opened his eyes. They were wet. You told them that? I did, but you never told me. No. Why? I looked at the photo of my younger self on the wall, then at Helen's image on the screen. Somehow, her frozen smile gave me the courage to answer honestly. Because I did not want your dream to feel borrowed from me. Ethan's face crumpled. I went on before emotion stopped me. You wanted emergency care because something in you leaned toward it. I saw that when you were little. I saw it when you asked me how to help a choking child, how to stop bleeding, how to keep someone calm. But when you got older, the house grew louder with other voices. Bigger careers, better status, more impressive titles. Jason shifted. I did not look at him. I thought if I said too much, you would pull away. So I did what old men often do when they are afraid of losing the people they love. I helped from a distance and pretended I needed nothing in return. Ethan wiped his face with his sleeve, forgetting his suit. Emily whispered, Dad, why didn't you tell me? I turned to her slowly. Would you have wanted me to? She froze. That was the question she had not prepared for. Of course, she said, but her voice did not hold. No, I said gently. You would have been embarrassed. Her tears spilled over. Jason stepped forward. That is unfair. I turned to him. Is it? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I looked back at Emily. You asked me not to talk about my old work. You told me not to bring up emergency stories around Ethan. You treated that part of my life like something dusty and inconvenient. If I had said, Emily, I know people in this field who could advise Ethan, would you have thanked me? Or would you have worried Jason might think I was interfering? She covered her mouth. There it was. The truth had not shouted. It had simply entered the room and stood where everyone could see it. Ethan turned to his mother. You told Grandpa not to talk to me about emergency care. The truth had not shouted. It had simply entered the room and stood where everyone could see it. Ethan turned to his mother. You told Grandpa turned to his mother. You told Grandpa not to talk to me about emergency care. Emily sobbed softly. I thought your father was right. I thought you needed to focus on programs, credentials, networking. I didn't want you getting distracted by old stories. Not to talk to me about emergency care. Emily sobbed softly. I thought your father was right. I thought you needed to focus on programs, credentials, networking. I didn't want you getting distracted by old stories. They weren't old stories, Ethan said. They were his life. Emily nodded, crying harder. I know that now. No, Ethan said, and his voice broke. You knew enough before tonight. You just didn't respect it. Jason snapped. Do not speak to your mother that way. Ethan turned toward him. Then how should I speak like you? Should I call Grandpa? Confused. Should I act like he's a burden until a whole hospital proves otherwise? Jason's face flushed dark red. Enough, I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped them. I looked at Ethan. Anger is understandable. Cruelty is still a choice. Don't let pain make you careless with your words. He swallowed and nodded. Then I looked at Jason. And you do not get to demand respect while offering none. Jason stared at me. For the first time since I had moved into his house, he had no quick answer. Dr. Miller cleared her throat softly. Mr. Foster, may I explain what I know? I nodded. She turned to Ethan. Your application came through the standard review system. Your grades, essay volunteer hours, and interview mattered. You were not admitted because of your grandfather alone. Ethan let out a breath, as if he had been afraid even his achievement had been taken from him. But Dr. Miller continued. Your file received additional attention because several senior professionals sent notes saying, your name should be watched carefully. Not because you were entitled to a position, but because they knew William Foster. They said if his grandson had chosen emergency care, someone should make sure the application was not lost in the pile. Rachel added, people trust his judgment. Ethan looked at me. You never even told them I was your grandson, did you? A sad smile touched my mouth. I did, but I mostly told them you were kind. That broke him. He stepped forward and hugged me. Not the polite holiday hug, not the quick arm around the shoulder. He held me like a boy who had finally found the person who had been standing behind him all along. I'm sorry, he whispered into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I closed my eyes and held him with both arms. You are learning, I said. That is all I ever wanted for you. When he pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer. Jason stood several feet away, humiliated and angry. Emily looked like she wanted to come closer, but no longer believed she had the right. That hurt because she was my daughter. Even after everything, part of me wanted to reach for her too. But another part knew that love without accountability becomes a room where the same injury happens over and over. Rachel walked to the digital display and closed the archive file. The screen returned to Helen's photograph for a brief second before cycling forward. Emily stared at her mother's face. Mom would be ashamed of me, she whispered. I turned to her. Your mother would be heartbroken. That is not the same as ashamed. Emily looked at me through tears. She loved you, I said. And because she loved you, she would expect better. The words were not cruel, but they made her cry harder. Jason muttered, This is becoming a public spectacle. Dr. Miller's voice sharpened. Mr. Carter, the only person still treating this like a spectacle is you. Patricia, the older nurse, stepped forward then. Mr. Foster, I don't mean to intrude, but there are staff members gathering near the ballroom. Some heard you were here. A few trained under people who trained under you. I blinked. Under people who trained under me? Rachel smiled. That's how legacy works. Legacy. The word felt too large for the old man standing there in a gray suit with tired hands. Ethan looked at me with quiet pride now, and it nearly undid me. Emily whispered, Dad, I kept asking you to disappear. I said nothing. She continued each word shaking. At dinners, at Jason's work events, tonight. I thought I was protecting Ethan's future, but I was hiding the person who had already helped build it. Jason turned away as though he could not bear hearing her admit it. Ethan looked at his mother. Why were you so embarrassed by him? Emily's face twisted. I don't know, she said, but I did. Not fully, perhaps, but enough. You were not embarrassed by me at first, I said. She looked up. You were embarrassed by where we came from. The small house, the long hours, the second-hand furniture after your mother got sick, the hospital bills, the way survival looked before Jason taught you to call it failure. Jason's head snapped back. That is not fair. Emily did not defend him. That silence told me I had touched the truth. I wanted better, she whispered. I wanted Ethan to have better. I wanted people to look at us and see success, not struggle. And somehow, I said, I became part of the struggle you wanted to hide. She nodded barely. That wounded me more deeply than I expected. Not because she admitted it, because she had lived it. The daughter I raised had not become cruel overnight. She had become afraid of being judged, afraid of looking small, afraid that love built from sacrifice would not impress people who valued polish. Fear had taught her to reject the very hands that had carried her. Ethan took my hand. Grandpa, he said, I don't want to be that kind of man. I looked at him. Then don't be. Remember people before they are useful to you, I said. And after. He nodded slowly. Behind him, Emily lowered her head and cried without hiding it this time. Then Dr. Miller's phone buzzed once more. She read the message and her expression changed. The board chair would like to restart the program, she said carefully. But they want to acknowledge what happened tonight. Jason groaned. Absolutely not. Dr. Miller looked at me, not him. They would like to thank Nurse Bennett, the response team. She paused. And you? I felt the hallway narrow. For years, I had hidden from applause. I had mistaken invisibility for humility. But tonight was no longer just about me. Ethan was watching. Emily was watching. Even Jason was watching. And perhaps the lesson was not that I had once mattered. Perhaps the lesson was that I still did. I looked at Rachel. She gave a small nod. I looked at Ethan. He stood taller. Then I looked at Emily. Her voice trembled. Dad, you don't have to hide because of me anymore. The words landed softly, but they opened something. I straightened my jacket. All right, I said. Jason stared at me. William, think carefully. I met his eyes. I am. Then I turned toward the ballroom with my grandson beside me, and my past no longer walking behind me like a ghost. When we walked back into the ballroom, the room did not return to normal. It tried to. The string quartet had resumed playing softly. Servers moved between tables with careful smiles. Donors held their glasses again, but the laughter had changed. It came in brief, uncertain pieces, as though everyone understood they were no longer attending the same kind of evening. A man had nearly died. A nurse had revealed my name. My family had watched the old man they ignored become someone the hospital remembered. And now every step I took toward the stage seemed to pull more whispers from the room. That's him. He was the one giving instructions. William Foster. I heard he trained half the emergency staff years ago. Ethan stayed beside me. His shoulder nearly touched mine, and though he said nothing, the message was clear. He was not letting me walk alone. Emily followed a few steps behind. I could hear her uneven breathing. Jason stayed beside her, rigid and angry, but quieter now. His silence was not peace. It was a man holding a door shut, while something powerful pushed from the other side. Dr. Miller led us toward the front of the ballroom, where the board chair, a tall man named Charles Whitman, stood near the podium. He had the polished look of someone used to speaking into microphones and receiving applause. But when he saw me, his expression softened into something more human. Mr. Foster, he said, extending his hand. I'm Charles Whitman, Chair of the St. Catherine's Foundation Board. I shook his hand. Good evening. On behalf of everyone here, thank you. Robert Langley's wife has already asked that we pass along her gratitude. I glanced toward the ballroom doors through which the stretcher had disappeared. How is he? Stable for now? Dr. Miller said. Cardiology is still evaluating, but early CPR made a major difference. A familiar relief passed through me. Not joy. In emergency care, you learn to respect the word stable without mistaking it for saved. Still, it meant there was time. Time for doctors, time for medicine, time for family. That's what matters, I said. Charles nodded. It does. But what also matters is acknowledging the people who acted. I felt my body tense. I don't need acknowledgement. Rachel, standing near Dr. Miller, gave me a look I remembered giving stubborn trainees. Charles smiled gently. Perhaps not, but others may need to witness it. I looked toward Ethan. He was watching me with a seriousness that made him seem older than 20. And I understood. Sometimes public respect is not for the person receiving it. Sometimes it is for those who were taught not to give it. Charles stepped to the podium and tapped the microphone. The room quieted almost instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for your patience and grace during what became an unexpected emergency this evening. We have just received word that Mr. Robert Langley is stable and receiving excellent care." A wave of relieved murmurs moved through the guests. Some people clapped softly. Charles continued. "Tonight was meant to honor tomorrow's caregivers. But moments ago, we were reminded that caregiving is not only a future profession. It is a calling that reveals itself when someone needs help right now." My throat tightened. Jason shifted behind me. "Nurse Rachel Bennett responded with skill and courage," Charles said. "Dr. Miller and the emergency response team acted with professionalism, and before they arrived, one guest stepped forward with calm structure and life-saving leadership." The room turned toward me. My first instinct was to step back. Ethan's hand touched my elbow. I stayed. "Mr. William Foster," Charles said, "would you please come forward?" Applause began before I moved. It was not thunderous at first. It was careful, respectful, almost tender. Then more people stood. Linda, the woman from my table, rose first. Patricia followed. Several nurses stood near the back. Then a few doctors. Then Ethan. My grandson stood for me. That nearly broke me. I walked to the podium slowly. Not because I wanted drama, but because my legs felt suddenly uncertain beneath the weight of memory. Rachel moved as if to help, then stopped when she saw I was steady enough. Charles offered me the microphone. I looked at it like it was an unfamiliar tool. "I'm not much for speeches," I said. A ripple of warm laughter moved through the room. I glanced toward the Hall of Honor corridor, as if Helen might still be standing there in her blue dress, rolling her eyes, because she had heard that excuse too many times. "I spent much of my life teaching people how to respond in emergencies," I said. "And one of the first things I taught was that the first few minutes matter. Not because they guarantee the outcome. They don't. But because those first minutes are where fear either takes over or training does." The ballroom was silent. Tonight, Nurse Bennett did what she was trained to do. The emergency team did what they were trained to do. And all of us should be grateful that Robert Langley was surrounded by people willing to act. I paused. My eyes moved briefly to Emily. She was crying openly now, no longer trying to protect her makeup, her image, or the perfect version of the evening she had wanted. Then I looked at Ethan. "This night was supposed to be about young people stepping into a life of service," I said. "That should still be what we remember, because skill matters, but character matters more. You can teach someone where to place their hands during CPR. You can teach them how to use an AED. But the deeper lesson is this: when a life is in front of you, you do not ask whether helping is convenient." Several heads nodded. Ethan wiped his eyes. I handed the microphone back, but Charles gently held up a hand. "Mr. Foster, before you step away, there is something else we should clarify." I felt Rachel's attention sharpen. Jason stiffened immediately. Charles turned slightly toward the table near the stage where several program administrators sat. "Dr. Reynolds, would you join us?" A man in his late 50s stood from the front table. I recognized him from earlier, the program director Jason had been trying so hard to impress. Dr. Michael Reynolds walked to the podium holding a slim folder. Jason moved forward quickly. "Charles, I don't think this is necessary." Charles looked at him. "Mr. Carter, I believe it is." The entire room felt the shift. Dr. Reynolds adjusted the microphone. "I was not aware until tonight that Mr. Foster was attending as a guest," he said. "But I was aware of his name long before this evening." Ethan looked at me sharply. "Doctor." Reynolds continued. "When applications were reviewed for our emergency care internship pathway, Ethan Carter's file stood out on its own merits. His volunteer hours essay and interview showed genuine promise." Ethan swallowed hard. But Dr. Reynolds said, opening the folder, his application also came with unusual support from several respected professionals in emergency training and nursing leadership. 3 of them had been directly trained by William Foster. 2 others were trained by people who credited Mr. Foster's methods as foundational to their careers. A murmur rolled across the room. Jason's face had gone pale. Dr. Reynolds looked toward Ethan. "Young man, your grandfather did not ask us to admit you. He did not pressure anyone. He did not use influence improperly. What he did was ask that your application be seen fully." Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. "And in my experience," Dr. Reynolds continued, "only a man of deep integrity knows the difference between opening a door and pushing someone through it." The applause that followed was stronger this time. Ethan turned toward me, tears running freely now. Jason said under his breath, "This is humiliating." Emily heard him. So did I. But this time, Emily did not shrink. She turned to her husband with a face I had not seen in years, steady, wounded, awake. "No, Jason," she said. "It's humbling. There's a difference." Jason stared at her as if she had betrayed him. Maybe she had. Or maybe she had finally stopped betraying herself. Dr. Reynolds stepped away from the microphone and approached me. "Mr. Foster," he said quietly, "I would be honored to speak with you later about our training curriculum." I almost laughed. "Doctor, I've been retired a long time. Experience does not expire," he said. Rachel smiled. Ethan looked at me as if those words had been written just for him. Then the program resumed, but it did not feel the same. When Ethan's internship group was called forward, he did not walk up with Jason's polished confidence behind him. He looked back at me first. I nodded. Only then did he step onto the stage. When he received his certificate, the applause was warm. But I saw what had changed in him. He did not stand taller because he had been honored. He stood taller because he finally understood the line of service behind him. Afterward, he came down from the stage and walked straight past Jason. He stopped in front of me. "I want to earn this," he said. "You already started," I told him. "No," he said. "I mean, really earn it. Not just the certificate, not just the program. I want to earn what you saw in me." My chest ached with pride. "Then start by remembering tonight." "I will." Jason approached, his smile forced back into place for the people still watching. "Well, Ethan, congratulations. Big night." Ethan looked at him, then at me. "It was," he said, "but not for the reason I thought." Jason's smile faded. Emily stepped closer to me, but stopped just short of touching my arm. "Dad," she whispered, "can we talk when we get home?" I looked at her. My daughter, my little girl, the woman who had hidden me, the child who had once asked if I saved anyone. "Yes," I said, "but not tonight." Her face fell, but she nodded. I needed her to understand something she had never had to learn before. Access to my heart was not the same as ownership of my silence. Across the room, Rachel was speaking with Patricia and Dr. Miller. "Dr. Reynolds was looking through the folder again. Guests were returning to their tables, but many still glanced toward me with respect. For the first time in years, I was not sitting in the corner of someone else's life. And Jason, watching the room look at me differently, seemed to realize that the power he had held over my name was slipping from his hands. The night was not over, but the truth had already changed seats. The applause faded, but the room did not stop looking at me. That was the strange part. Recognition does not end when the clapping stops. It lingers. It changes the way people hold their bodies around you. It makes some people kinder, some people ashamed, and some people angry because the old arrangement no longer works. Jason was the angry one. I saw it the moment we left the front of the ballroom. His smile returned only when someone important glanced our way. The second we reached the quieter side of the room, it vanished. "This has gone far enough," he said. Ethan turned to him. What as Jason lowered his voice, but not enough. "This performance." Emily looked stunned. "Performance?" "Yes," Jason said. "Everyone is acting like William was some hidden saint because he had an old career and made a few phone calls. It does not erase the fact that tonight was supposed to be about our son." "Our son just learned his grandfather helped him," Emily said. Jason laughed bitterly. "Helped him, or stole the attention." The words struck the air so hard that even Rachel, several feet away, stopped talking. Ethan's face changed first. It was not anger this time. It was disappointment so deep it looked like exhaustion. "Dad," he said, "a man almost died." "I know that. Grandpa helped save him." "I know that too. Then why are you acting like the emergency was an inconvenience to your image?" Jason's eyes flashed. "Because you are too young to understand how people work. Rooms like this matter. Impressions matter. We were building connections for your future." Ethan looked at me, then back at his father. And Grandpa had already built connections by being good at something real. Jason's jaw tightened. Emily whispered Ethan, but Ethan did not back down. "No, Mom. I need to say this. I spent years thinking Grandpa was just this quiet old man in our house because that's how we treated him. Not because he was small, but because we made him small. And Dad is still trying to do it." I felt the room close in around us. Not because everyone heard, but because enough people did. Jason stepped closer to his son. "You will not humiliate me in public." I felt the room close in around us. Not because everyone heard, but because enough people did. Jason stepped closer to his son. "You will not humiliate me in public." Ethan's voice shook. "You humiliated Grandpa in private for years." Jason's face went red. I stepped between them, not physically blocking, but enough to shift the energy. "Enough," I said. Jason turned on me. "You don't get to say enough after letting this circus happen." There it was again, the mask slipping. Emily gasped. "Jason!" He pointed toward the stage. "You stood up there and let them make me look like a fool." "No," I said calmly. "You did that without my help." His eyes widened. For 3 years, I had swallowed words. I had let him correct me, dismiss me, reduce me, and explain me away. I had mistaken patience for peace. But patience without dignity becomes permission. Jason leaned in. "You think one round of applause makes you powerful?" I looked at him carefully. "No," I said. "I think one night of truth made you uncomfortable." Rachel moved closer, but Dr. Miller gently touched her arm, letting the moment unfold. Jason scoffed. "Truth. The truth is, you live in my house." Emily's face drained. Ethan whispered, "Dad, stop." But Jason was no longer speaking to persuade. He was speaking because control was leaving him, and he wanted to wound something on the way out. "You live in the room we gave you," he said. "You eat at our table. You depend on us. And now everyone wants to pretend we owe you something because you had a job decades ago." The silence that followed was not shock. It was judgment. A few guests turned away, embarrassed for him. Patricia stared at him with open disgust. Rachel's eyes burned. Emily looked as though each word had cut her too. I felt a familiar ache rise in me, but this time it did not bend my spine. "You are right about one thing," I said. Jason blinked. "I live in your house. I continued. At least I have been staying there. But I have never been your possession. I have never been your burden to display or hide depending on who visits, and I have never depended on your respect because you never offered any. His mouth opened, but I did not let him speak. I helped raise your son. I paid grocery bills when you said business was tight. I fixed things in that house you never noticed until they worked again. I sat alone in my room during your dinners so you could pretend your life was cleaner than it was. I did all of that quietly because I loved my daughter and my grandson. Emily began to cry again, but I kept going. But silence is not the same as weakness. And love is not the same as permission. Jason looked around, suddenly aware that people were listening. Lower your voice, he muttered. My voice has been low for years, I said. That was the problem. Ethan's eyes filled. Emily took one step toward me. Dad. I turned to her, and my voice softened, though the truth did not. Emily, I love you. I have loved you since the first moment I held you. I loved you when you were proud of me, and I loved you when you became embarrassed by me. But I need you to understand something tonight. She nodded, trembling. You did not protect Ethan by hiding me. You taught him to overlook the quiet person in the room. She covered her mouth, and Jason did not create that lesson alone. You allowed it. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know, Jason snapped. Emily, do not stand there and take this. She turned to him slowly. Maybe I need to. That stopped him more effectively than anything I had said. Dr. Miller stepped forward, then her tone professional but firm. Mr. Carter, I think it would be wise to pause this conversation. Jason looked at her sharply. This is family business. It became hospital business when you publicly questioned the competence and dignity of a man who assisted in an emergency response at our event. Rachel added, and it became human business when you called him dependent like that. Erased his worth. Jason's face tightened with humiliation. I don't need lectures from a nurse. Rachel's expression turned cold. Before I could speak, Ethan did. You mean the nurse who saved Mr. Langley because Grandpa trained her? Jason stared at him. Be careful, Ethan continued, voice trembling with anger. Because every time you try to insult someone tonight, you end up proving you never understood what matters. For a moment, I thought Jason might walk away. Instead, he looked at Emily. Are you going to let our son speak to me like this? Emily wiped her face. I am going to let him tell the truth. That was the moment Jason finally understood he was standing alone. Not because we hated him, because truth had removed the audience he depended on. He looked at me, then at Emily, then at Ethan. His mouth twisted. Fine, he said. Enjoy your little hero moment. He turned and walked toward the exit. No one followed. That might have been the first real consequence he had felt all night. Emily watched him go shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. But I did not step in to comfort her immediately. I wanted to. The father in me ached to pull her close and say we would fix it all before morning. But some apologies need space around them so they can become change instead of relief. I believe you're sorry, I said. She looked at me with desperate hope. But sorry is only the beginning. Her face crumpled again, but she nodded. I know. Ethan took my hand. Grandpa, will you come home with us tonight? I looked toward the ballroom doors where Jason had disappeared. Then I looked at Emily. She already knew the answer before I spoke. No, I said gently. Not tonight. Ethan looked frightened. Where will you go? Linda and her husband offered me a ride to a hotel nearby, I said. Dr. Miller said the hospital can help arrange it. Emily whispered. Dad, please don't leave like this. I am not leaving to punish you, I said. I am leaving because I need one night where no one makes me smaller. Her shoulders shook. Rachel stood nearby, tears in her eyes, but pride in her posture. Dr. Reynolds approached quietly. Mr. Foster, whenever you are ready, I would still like to speak with you about our training curriculum. Not tonight, but soon. I nodded. Soon. Ethan hugged me again. This time, he held on longer. I should have seen you, he whispered. I placed a hand on the back of his head, the way I had when he was a boy. You see me now? When he stepped back, Emily stood before me, broken and uncertain. Dad, she said, is there any way back from this? I looked at my daughter and I thought of Helen, of our small house, of melted peppermints in my jacket pocket, of a little girl asking if I saved anybody today. Yes, I said softly, but not by pretending it didn't happen. She nodded through tears. Across the ballroom, guests began gathering their coats. The gala was ending, but my life felt as if it had just crossed a threshold I could never uncross. For years, I had feared that if my family knew who I had been, they might still choose not to care. Tonight, I learned something harder and more freeing. Whether they cared or not, I still had to remember who I was. I did not sleep much that night. The hotel room was clean, quiet, and comfortable, but it felt strange to be alone in a place where no one expected me to shrink. No footsteps passed my door. No one lowered their voice in the hallway. No one worried that my mail, my coat, my memories, or my breathing might clutter the house. Linda's husband had driven me there after the gala. Rachel had insisted on walking me to the car. Ethan wanted to come with me, but I told him to go home with his mother. You don't have to protect me tonight, I said. His face tightened. I should have protected you sooner. I touched his shoulder. You are 20 years old, Ethan. You are allowed to become better without carrying every mistake that happened before you understood it. He hugged me again in the hospital parking lot. Emily stood several feet away, wrapped in her coat, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Jason had left in a rideshare before the rest of us came outside. For once, no one chased him. That told me more than any argument could. At the hotel, I took off the navy tie and laid it across the chair. For a long time, I sat on the edge of the bed in my undershirt and stared at my hands. They had not shaken during the emergency. They had shaken afterward. That was how it often worked. A person can hold steady while someone's life hangs by seconds, then fall apart while brushing their teeth. I thought of Robert Langley. I thought of his wife calling his name. I thought of Rachel kneeling beside him, counting compressions, doing exactly what she had been trained to do. I thought of Ethan watching me as if a curtain had been pulled back from his own bloodline. Then I thought of Emily, my daughter, my little girl with sticky fingers and melted peppermints, the woman who had asked me not to talk about my life. Grief does not come in one shape. Sometimes it is death. Sometimes it is realizing someone you raised has learned to survive by being ashamed of you. At 6:18 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Emily. I stared at her name until the screen went dark. Then it buzzed again. Dad, I know you said not tonight. It's morning now. I'm not asking you to come back. I just need to know you're safe. I typed slowly. I'm safe. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I'm sorry. I set the phone down. Those two words can be heavy or light depending on what stands behind them. I did not yet know which kind Emily's were. A few minutes later, another message came. I did not sleep. Ethan barely spoke to me. Jason is furious. I don't know what happens next, but I know I was wrong. I read that message several times. Then I replied, "Knowing is the first step. It is not the last." She did not answer immediately. I showered, dressed in the same gray suit pants and a clean white shirt, then went downstairs to the hotel breakfast area. I poured coffee into a paper cup and sat near the window. Outside, Cincinnati moved on as if my world had not cracked open. Cars passed. A delivery truck stopped at the curb. A young father carried a sleeping child through the lobby. Life is almost cruel in its ordinary rhythm after an emotional storm. At 8:05, Ethan called. "Grandpa M. Here." His voice sounded rough. "Can I come see you?" I looked down at my coffee. "Where are you in the parking lot?" I closed my eyes. Of course he was. 5 minutes later, he walked into the breakfast room wearing yesterday's dress shoes, jeans, and a wrinkled college sweatshirt. He looked young again, tired, ashamed, determined. He sat across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Mom cried all night." "I'm sorry she's hurting." "She deserves to hurt." I shook my head gently. "Be careful with that." He looked down. "I know. His hands curled into fists on the table. "I keep replaying everything. Every time Dad made jokes. Every time Mom told you not to say something. Every time I walked past your room without knocking. You were right there." "Yes," I said. "I was." His eyes filled. "Why didn't you get angry sooner?" I almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. I was angry. I just mistook swallowing it for loving you. He looked up. "That is a mistake many parents make," I said. "We think if we absorb enough pain, our children will be spared it. But pain that is never named becomes part of the furniture. Everyone learns to walk around it." Ethan wiped his face. "I don't want to be like Dad." "Then do not practice his habits," I said. "What habits?" "Measuring people by usefulness, mistaking confidence for character, treating kindness as weakness, and speaking most sharply to the people who are least likely to leave." He nodded slowly as though writing it somewhere inside himself. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook. "I want you to teach me," he said. I looked at the notebook. "Teach you what emergency care, not just what the program teaches, what you know. The calm part, the human part." My chest tightened. "Ethan, I'm serious," he said. "I don't want to wear a badge someday and be empty inside. I want to understand what you meant when you said every patient is someone's whole world." For the first time since the gala, something in me softened without hurting. "That lesson does not start with equipment," I said. "I know. It starts with humility." He nodded. "Then start there." So I did, right there in the hotel breakfast room beside a waffle machine and a bowl of bruised apples. I began teaching my grandson the first lesson I had taught hundreds of students. When you enter a crisis, I said you are not there to become important. You are there to become useful. But useful does not mean loud. It means clear. It means present. It means you respect the person in front of you enough to stay steady. Ethan wrote every word down. Watching him, I remembered Emily at 8 years old, coloring at the kitchen table while I prepared lesson plans. I wondered when she had stopped being proud and started being afraid. As if my thoughts had called her, my phone buzzed again. "Dad, may I come by later?" "Alone?" I stared at the message. Ethan saw her name Are you going to let her? I took a slow breath. Yes, I said, but not because she asked, because I'm ready to hear what she has to say. That afternoon, Emily came to the hotel lobby without makeup, without jewelry, without Jason. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, the way she wore it when she was young and helping Helen bake Christmas cookies. She stopped several feet from me. Hi, Dad. Hello, Emily. She looked at the chair across from me. May I sit? Yes. She sat, folded her hands, then unfolded them. I wrote down what I wanted to say, she whispered. Because if I don't, I'll start crying and make it about me. That surprised me. She pulled a folded sheet of paper from her purse. I am not here to ask you to come home, she began, voice trembling. I am not here to blame Jason, even though he was cruel. I let him be cruel. I copied him. I made your life smaller because I was embarrassed by struggle, by aging, by anything that made our family look less successful than I wanted. Tears slipped down her face, but she kept reading. I told myself I was protecting Ethan's future. But the truth is, I was protecting my image. I wanted people to think we came from Polish, not sacrifice. I forgot that sacrifice is the reason I had anything to polish. My throat tightened. She lowered the paper. I don't expect you to forgive me today, she said. I don't deserve that, but I want to become the kind of daughter who does not need a hospital wall to remind her who her father is. For a long moment, I could not speak. Then I said, that is the first honest thing you've said to me in a long time. She cried then, but quietly. Not for performance. Not to escape responsibility, just because truth had finally touched what shame had covered. I love you, Dad, she said. I love you too, I answered. But love is not enough by itself. She nodded. I know. You will need to change what happens in that house. I know, and I will not return to being hidden. Her eyes met mine. I won't ask you to. I believed she meant it. I did not yet know if she could live it. But for the first time in years, my daughter had come to me without asking me to disappear. And that was not healing. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The next 3 days were quieter than I expected. Quiet can be a gift, but it can also be a test. Without shouting, without applause, without a ballroom full of witnesses, a person has to decide what the truth still means. I stayed at the hotel for 2 nights, then moved into a small furnished apartment, arranged through a senior housing contact Dr. Miller recommended. It was not fancy. 1 bedroom, a modest kitchen, a view of a parking lot, and a line of maple trees. But when I unlocked the door for the first time, something in my chest loosened. Every inch of that little place belonged to my peace. No spare room, no side table, no one asking me to eat quietly somewhere else. Ethan helped me carry in the few things Emily brought from the house. My clothes, my books, Helen's photograph, the old leather Bible, 2 cardboard boxes of certificates and letters I had not opened in years. When he saw the boxes, Ethan stopped. Is this all your stuff from before most of it? Can we look through it sometime? I set 1 box on the kitchen counter. Sometime, yes. He nodded, then hesitated. Mom packed everything carefully. I'm glad. She cried while doing it. I looked out the window at the maple trees. I imagine she did. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Do you feel bad for leaving? Yes, I said. His face fell. But feeling bad does not mean I made the wrong choice. He sat down slowly on the small sofa. How do you know? Because peace and guilt can arrive together, I said. Guilt often comes when you stop letting people rely on your silence. Peace comes when you know the silence was costing you too much. He wrote that down in the notebook he had started carrying everywhere. I smiled faintly. You don't have to write down everything I say. Yes, I do, he said. I missed 20 years of lessons. You are 20 years old. Exactly. That made me laugh, and the sound surprised both of us. For the first time since the gala, laughter did not feel borrowed from grief. Emily came by the next afternoon. She called first. She asked if it was all right. She did not assume. That mattered. When she arrived, she brought a covered dish of chicken soup, a bag of groceries, and an apology in her eyes before she even spoke. I wasn't sure what you needed, she said from the doorway. I need you to come in without looking like you're entering a courtroom. She gave a small, broken smile. I deserve court. Probably, I said. But I don't have a robe. She laughed through her nerves and stepped inside. For a while, we unpacked groceries in the little kitchen. She placed coffee in the cabinet, eggs in the refrigerator, apples in a bowl on the counter. The movements were ordinary, almost domestic, but there was a carefulness between us now. She no longer moved through my space like she owned the right to arrange it. She asked where things should go. That mattered too. Finally, she sat at the small table and folded her hands. Jason says you're overreacting. I poured coffee into 2 mugs. I expected that. He says everyone got emotional because of the emergency. He says Dr. Miller and Rachel made it dramatic. I set 1 mug in front of her. And what do you say? Emily stared into the coffee. I say, I let him teach me to value the wrong things. That was not an excuse. It was a confession. I sat across from her. Jason did not create every choice you made. I know, she said quickly. I know. That's what I keep coming back to. It would be easier if I could blame him for all of it, but I can't. He was cruel, but I became cowardly. I watched her carefully. She continued. When Mom died, I felt like everything from before hurt too much to look at. The small house, your old jacket, the hospital smell on your clothes, the way bills piled up when she was sick. Then I married Jason, and his world felt clean, successful, controlled. I understood more than I wanted to. Control can look like safety when grief has made life feel messy, I said. She nodded, crying softly. Yes. That's exactly it. And you reminded me of everything I was trying not to feel. So you made me smaller. I did, she whispered. There are moments when an apology becomes real, not because it is dramatic, but because it stops defending itself. Emily looked around the apartment. Are you staying here permanently? For now? Does that mean you won't come home? I took a slow breath. Emily, I don't think your house is my home anymore. Her face crumpled, but she did not argue. I understand. I need a place where I am not dependent on Jason's mood, your courage, or Ethan's awareness. She flinched, but nodded again. I want to rebuild, she said. Not because I want things to go back. I know they can't. I want something better than what we had. I looked at my daughter, and my heart ached with love and caution. Better will require boundaries. I know. No more asking me to hide at family events. Never again. No more speaking about me like I'm an inconvenience. I won't. No letting Jason do it while you stand there quietly. She closed her eyes. That was the hardest one. When she opened them, she said, I told him last night that if he speaks about you that way again, Ethan and I will leave the room. That is a beginning. He didn't take it well. I imagine not. She gave a tired laugh. He said I was choosing you over my marriage. And what did you say? She looked at me, her voice trembling but steady. I said I was choosing respect. And if our marriage can't survive that, then maybe I need to know. For a long moment, I saw not a guilty daughter, but a woman waking up inside her own life. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. She broke down then, not loudly, not like someone demanding comfort, just a daughter finally allowed to grieve what she had done and what she had lost. "I'm sorry, Daddy." She broke down then, not loudly, not like someone demanding comfort, just a daughter finally allowed to grieve what she had done and what she had lost. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. Daddy. I had not heard that from her in years. The word moved through me like a hand opening an old drawer. "I know I said." She squeezed my hand. "Do you forgive me?" The question hung there, fragile and dangerous. I wanted to say yes. I wanted the relief of it. I wanted to make her pain stop. But I had spent too many years using my gentleness to end other people's discomfort. So I told the truth. "I am beginning to." She cried harder, but she nodded. "That's fair." "And Emily?" "Yes. Forgiveness does not mean I move back. I know. It does not mean we pretend. I know. And it does not mean you get immediate access to every part of me you ignored." That one hurt her. I saw it. But she took it. "I understand," she said. I believed she was trying to. After she left, Ethan arrived with a stack of index cards and a second-hand CPR training manual he had found online. He placed them on the table with the seriousness of a medical resident preparing for surgery. "Ready for lesson 2?" he asked. I looked at the manual, then at him. What was lesson 1? Do not enter a crisis to become important. Enter to become useful. I nodded, pleased despite myself. "Good." He smiled. I also wrote down the part about humility. "Then lesson 2 is this," I said. "Respect the patient before the procedure." He opened his notebook. I leaned back, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint traffic outside, the sound of my grandson's pen scratching paper. For years I had thought my teaching life was over. But maybe purpose does not end when the world stops calling your name. Maybe it waits quietly until you stop believing you are too old to answer. A week later, Dr. Reynolds called. "Mr. Foster," he said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Not at all. I spoke with Dr. Miller and Nurse Bennett. We are rebuilding part of our emergency readiness curriculum for new interns. I meant what I said at the gala. We would be honored if you would consult with us. I looked across the apartment at Helen's photograph. Her smile seemed almost knowing. "I've been out of formal instruction for years," I said. "Good," Dr. Reynolds replied. "Then you'll know what still matters after the trends change." That made me laugh. He continued. "There's no pressure. Part-time. Advisory. You would review materials, sit in on simulations, perhaps speak to the interns once a month. Once a month. A small door. But open. You'll think about it," I said. Of course, after we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. Then I called Ethan. "Lesson 3 may need to be at the hospital," I said. He shouted so loudly, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. That evening, Emily texted me. Ethan told me. Mom would be proud. "I am proud too, Dad." I read the message twice. Then I typed back. "Thank you." Not all healing arrives as an embrace. Sometimes it arrives as a locked apartment door, a grandson with a notebook, a daughter learning to knock, and a phone call reminding you that your life is not finished simply because someone treated it like old history. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. The first time I walked back into St. Catherine's as a consultant, I almost turned around in the parking lot. Not because I was afraid of the hospital. I had walked into worse places than training rooms. I had stood beside wrecked cars, school gymnasiums, turned into triage centers, and emergency bays where families prayed with their whole bodies. But this was different. This was not a crisis calling me in. This was life asking whether I was willing to be seen again. Ethan rode with me that morning. He had shown up at my apartment wearing a pressed shirt, dark pants, and the serious expression of a young man trying to look older than he was. "You look nervous?" I said as he helped me into his car. "I am nervous." "Good." He glanced at me. "Good. Nervous means you understand it matters. Just don't let nervous drive." He smiled a little. "You're really going to turn everything into a lesson, aren't you? At my age, that is one of the few privileges left." He laughed, and the sound warmed the whole car. When we reached the hospital, Rachel was waiting near the education wing entrance. She wore navy scrubs, her badge clipped neatly, her hair pulled back. When she saw me, she broke into a smile that made her look like that frightened student again, only stronger. "Mr. Foster," she said, "welcome back." The words hit me harder than I expected. Welcome back. Not as a patient, not as a forgotten guest, not as someone's elderly relative waiting in the corner. Back. Dr. Reynolds joined us inside the simulation center. He shook my hand with both of his. "I can't tell you what this means to us," he said. I looked around the room. Training mannequins, whiteboards, cabinets of supplies, a row of young interns whispering nervously near the wall, the smell of rubber disinfectant and coffee. My body remembered before my mind did. Rachel leaned toward me. "They're terrified." "They should be," I said. Ethan looked alarmed. I smiled faintly. "Not of me, of the responsibility." Dr. Reynolds introduced me to the interns as an honorary curriculum advisor. He listed a few old credentials, but not too many. I had asked him not to make it ceremonial. I did not want a tribute that day. I wanted a classroom. Still, when he said my name, several interns straightened. One young woman whispered to another, "That's him." I pretended not to hear. Rachel handed me a marker. For a second, I simply held it. Something as small as a marker can become a key if it opens a part of you that grief locked away. I turned to the whiteboard and wrote 5 words. Scene, breath, circulation, command, continuity. Then I faced them. Most people think emergency care begins when your hands touch the patient, I said. It doesn't. It begins the moment you decide not to panic. The room went still. I walked slowly, not with the old force I once had, but with a steadiness I trusted. Panic is loud. Training is specific. Panic says, do something. Training says, do the next right thing. There is a difference. Ethan sat near the back beside Rachel. He had his notebook open, but after a few minutes, he stopped writing and simply listened. I put the interns through a basic scenario first. Witnessed collapse, crowded public space, 1 responder, limited equipment. They made predictable mistakes. Too many hands near the patient. Too much talking. No clear leader. 1 intern reached for imaginary equipment before checking breathing. Another froze when the AED instructions began. I stopped the simulation. The room braced for embarrassment. I remembered being young enough to think correction meant shame. Good, I said. They looked confused. You made mistakes here, I continued, which means no real patient paid for them. That is why we trained. A young man raised his hand. Sir, I froze. Yes, I said. And now we know where the ice is. Rachel smiled from the back. We ran it again. This time the room improved. Not perfect. Better? Better saves lives more often than pride does. After the session, Ethan stayed behind. He walked to the mannequin and looked down at it for a long time. I understand now, he said. What? Why Rachel cried when she saw you? I looked toward the hallway where Rachel was speaking with Dr. Reynolds. She remembered the training. No, Ethan said. She remembered being believed in. That pierced me. There are moments when the student becomes the teacher without meaning to. You may be right, I said. That afternoon, Emily came to the hospital. She had asked first. That was still new. She stood outside the simulation room holding 2 coffees and a small paper bag from the bakery near my apartment. Her face was nervous, but open. I brought oatmeal cookies, she said. For a moment, I could not speak. Helen used to pack oatmeal cookies in my lunch on long training days. Emily knew that. She remembered. Ethan looked between us and quietly stepped out with Rachel giving us space. Emily held out the bag. I thought maybe Mom would approve. She would, I said, taking it. We sat in a small consultation room. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then Emily reached into her purse and pulled out another folded sheet of paper. You don't have to read it now, she said. It's not an apology this time. It's a list. A list. She nodded. Things am changing. I unfolded it. She had written in careful handwriting, I will not let Jason insult Dad in my presence. I will not describe Dad as a burden. I will ask before assuming. I will visit his apartment as a guest. I will tell Ethan the truth about our family, including the hard parts. I will stop treating struggle like shame. I will earn trust slowly. My vision blurred before I reached the last line. I know a list doesn't fix it, she said quickly. No, I said, but it shows direction. She exhaled shakily. Then she said, Jason wants to come by. My hand tightened around the paper. Emily noticed. I told him not until you agree. What does he want? She looked down. I think he wants things to feel normal again. That is not the same as remorse. I know. Do you? She met my eyes. Yes, I told him I won't help him rush you. The daughter across from me was not healed, not perfect, not suddenly brave in every way. But she was trying in a way that had shape, that mattered. 2 evenings later, Jason came to my apartment. I agreed only because Emily asked once and accepted my first silence without pushing. When Jason arrived, he wore no suit jacket, no expensive watch, just a plain sweater and jeans. It might have been an attempt at humility, but I decided not to judge the costume before hearing the man. He stood just inside my doorway. William, he said. Jason. Emily waited in the hallway. I had asked her not to come in. This conversation belonged to the 2 of us. Jason looked around the apartment uncomfortable. You've settled in. I have. He nodded, then cleared his throat. I said things I shouldn't have said. I waited. He shifted. At the gala, before the gala, over the years. Still I waited. His jaw worked, as if each honest word had to be dragged past his pride. I treated you like you were beneath me because it made me feel in control, he said finally. And when people respected you, I felt exposed. That was the first sentence that sounded real. I sat in the chair near the window. Why did you need me beneath you? He looked away. Because you saw through me, he said quietly. Even when you didn't say anything. I always felt like you knew I was pretending to be more secure than I was. I had not expected that. He continued, Your calm made me uncomfortable, so I mocked it. Your quiet made me uncomfortable, so I called it weakness. And when Emily started listening to me, I let it happen because it made me feel important. The room became very still. I am sorry, he said. I studied him. There was shame in his face, but shame is not the same as transformation. It can become transformation if a person lets it teach instead of rot. I hear you, I said. His expression tightened with disappointment. He had wanted more, but I had learned not to give more simply because someone was uncomfortable with less. I don't expect forgiveness. His expression tightened with disappointment. He had wanted more, but I had learned not to give more simply because someone was uncomfortable with less. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, though part of him clearly did. That's good, I said, because forgiveness is not available on demand. He nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. He looked toward the door. Ethan barely talks to me, then becomes someone worth talking to. The words hit him hard. I did not soften them. Jason left after 20 minutes. No hug, no dramatic reconciliation. But he left quieter than he came. Later that night, Ethan called. Mom said Dad apologized. He did. Did you forgive him? No. Oh. I may someday, I said, but accountability must have time to prove itself. Ethan was quiet, then said, That's going in the notebook. I laughed. A month passed. I taught at St. Catherine's twice more. Emily visited every Sunday afternoon and always knocked. Jason began therapy according to her, though she did not use it as a bargain, though she did not use it as a bargaining chip. Ethan trained harder than ever. Rachel became not just a former student, but a friend. Then Dr. Reynolds called again. We're holding a formal launch for the revised emergency training programming chip. Ethan trained harder than ever. Rachel became not just a former student, but a friend. Then Dr. Reynolds called again. We're holding a formal launch for the revised emergency training program, he said. We would like to name you Honorary Emergency Training Advisor publicly. I sat down slowly. Publicly, yes. Staff interns, some former trainees' families. Nothing too overwhelming. I almost laughed. People always say that before overwhelming you. We would be honored if you accepted, he said. I looked at Helen's photograph. This time I did not hear her telling me to stop hiding. I heard her asking gently, Will you let them celebrate you now? I closed my eyes. Yes, I said, I'll accept. The formal launch took place on a Thursday afternoon in the same education wing where I had almost turned around weeks earlier. This time, I did not hesitate in the parking lot. Ethan drove me again. He wore his intern badge clipped carefully to his shirt, and every few minutes, he glanced at me with the kind of nervous pride young people try to hide. You okay? He asked. I was about to ask you that. He smiled. I'm not the one being honored. No, I said. You're the one learning how to stand near someone else's honor without making it about yourself. That is a good skill. He shook his head. Lesson 400. Approximately. He laughed, then grew quiet as we pulled into St. Catherine's. Emily was already waiting near the entrance. She wore a simple navy dress and held a small bouquet of white flowers. Not roses, not anything too grand, just something gentle. When she saw me, she did not rush forward or cry dramatically. She walked to me slowly and kissed my cheek. Hi, Dad. Hello, sweetheart. Her eyes softened at that word. I brought these, she said, handing me the flowers. For Mom, too, in a way. I looked down at them. Helen would have liked that. Thank you. Then I saw Jason standing a few steps behind her. He looked uncomfortable, but not angry. That was progress. He did not move forward until I looked at him. William, he said. Jason, I'm glad you're here. I studied his face. The sentence was simple, and for once he did not seem to be performing it. Thank you, I said. That was all. Not every relationship heals into warmth. Some begin again as careful civility, and that can be enough for the day. Inside the training auditorium, I saw more people than I expected. Nurses, interns, administrators, board members, former students, a few retired responders and staff I did not know. Along one wall stood photographs from the revised emergency readiness curriculum. On the front screen were 5 words I had written on the board weeks before: scene, breath, circulation, command, continuity. I stared at them and felt my life fold strangely into itself. A method I once thought had vanished was now displayed for young people who had not even been born when I first taught it. Rachel met us near the front row. She hugged me without asking, and I let her. You ready? She whispered. No. Good. You always said confidence without humility was dangerous. I laughed softly. I regret teaching you so well. She grinned through tears. Dr. Reynolds opened the ceremony with warmth and restraint. He spoke about emergency care not as heroism, but as preparation. Dr. Miller followed and told the room what had happened at the gala without making it theatrical. She named Rachel the response team, the AED runner, the doctor who took over compressions, and the importance of immediate action. Then she said my name. William Foster reminded us that experience does not disappear when the world stops paying attention. The room grew still. I felt Emily reach for my hand. She did not grip it like a child asking for rescue. She held it like a daughter offering witness. Dr. Reynolds returned to the podium. Today, St. Catherine's Medical Center formally names Mr. William Foster as Honorary Emergency Training Advisor for our revised Emergency Readiness Program. People stood before I did. Applause filled the room, not sudden and wild, but deep, sustained, respectful. I looked at the faces. Rachel crying openly. Ethan standing tall. Emily, one hand over her heart. Jason clapping quietly, eyes lowered, but present. And in my mind, Helen in her blue dress, smiling like she had been waiting years for me to stop stepping away from my own life. I walked to the podium. This time, my hands trembled before I spoke. I did not hide it. I used to think being needed was the same as being valued. I began. It is not. The room settled into silence. Being needed can make the person useful. Being valued makes a person seen. And there is a difference. I looked toward the interns. In emergency care, we teach people to notice what others miss. A weak pulse, a blocked airway, a frightened witness, a danger in the room. But outside of emergencies, we sometimes fail to notice the people sitting right beside us. Emily lowered her head. I continued, some of the strongest people you will ever meet will not announce themselves. They may be old, quiet, tired, poorly dressed, grieving, sitting alone. They may not tell you what they survived or what they built. But their silence does not mean their lives were empty. Rachel wiped her cheeks. I looked at Ethan. If you wear a badge, someday wear it with humility. Never confuse position with worth. Never treat a patient, a janitor, a family member, or an elderly person as though their story begins only when they become useful to you. My voice caught, but I kept going. And to my family, Emily looked up. I love you. I have always loved you, But love grows healthier when truth is allowed to stand in the room. I am grateful we are learning that together. Emily began to cry, but she smiled through it. I turned back to the audience. I accept this honor not because I believe my work was perfect or because my life was without mistakes. I accept it because the lessons we pass on may travel farther than we ever see. A student becomes a nurse. A nurse saves a stranger. A grandson chooses service. A daughter remembers. An old man begins again. The applause started softly. Then it rose. I stepped away from the podium before it overwhelmed me, but this time I did not flee from it. After the ceremony, a line formed. Former students shook my hand. Young interns asked questions. One retired firefighter told me my disaster response class had changed the way his department trained volunteers. Patricia brought her cousin's daughter, now a grown woman, to thank me for the bus crash response training that had helped save her. I could barely speak. Legacy is a humbling thing when it stops being an idea and starts having faces. Near the end, Ethan approached with his notebook. "Grandpa," he said, "I wrote down the last line." "Which one?" An old man begins again. I smiled. That was not a lesson. That was a confession. "Same thing," he said. Emily stepped beside him. "Dad, would you have dinner with us Sunday at your apartment? I'll bring food. You choose where everyone sits." I looked at her for a long moment. She was asking, not assuming. "Yes," I said. "Sunday would be nice." Jason approached slowly. "He'll come if you're comfortable with that." That surprised me. I looked at him then, at Emily, then at Ethan. "You may come," I said. "But understand something. My home is a place of respect." Jason nodded. "I understand." I hoped he did. Healing is not proven in ceremonies. It is proven in kitchens, in ordinary conversations, in what people do after the applause is gone. That Sunday they came to my apartment. Emily brought chicken soup. Ethan brought his notebook. Jason brought oatmeal cookies from the bakery and placed them carefully beside Helen's photograph. No one asked me to sit aside. No one spoke over me. No one treated my memories like clutter. After dinner, Ethan asked me to tell the story of my first emergency call. Emily listened with tears in her eyes. Jason listened quietly. Not perfectly, not warmly perhaps, but respectfully, and that was enough for that evening. Later, after they left, I stood by the window and watched their car pull away. My apartment was quiet again. But this quiet was different. It was not the silence of being ignored. It was the peace of being whole. I picked up Helen's photograph and smiled. "You were right," I whispered. I disappeared for a while. Then I looked at the flowers Emily had brought still bright in a vase near the window. But I came back. Life has a quiet way of testing whether we truly see the people closest to us. Sometimes, the person sitting silently at the end of the table carries stories of courage, sacrifice, and wisdom that no one bothered to ask about. William Foster's journey reminds us that age does not erase value. Silence does not mean emptiness, and humility should never be mistaken for weakness. The deepest pain often comes not from strangers, but from family members who forget the hands that once held them up. But this story also shows us that healing is still possible when truth is finally spoken, when apologies become action, and when love learns to stand beside respect. No one should have to prove their worth through a crisis just to be treated with dignity. Every parent, grandparent, caregiver, and quiet soul deserves to be seen before the applause, before the emergency, before the world confirms what families should have known all along. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt overlooked by your own family? Or have you ever realized too late how much someone sacrificed for you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe and stay with us for the next emotional journey.